Okay, Dan, we are streaming and recording.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the planning board meeting. It's Wednesday, March 10th. It's 7:01 and we're about to begin. Before we begin, I'll read the Governor Baker's March 12th order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting of the Dudley Planning Board will be conducted in total or in part via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirements to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at dudleyma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: via Facebook Live and or posted link at dudleyma.gov.
Hey, Dan.
Yo.
There's an echo on your voice.
Don't know
Can you
why
hear
that
yourself
is.
now?
No, I can't hear myself. I'm just talking.
He sounds fine to me.
So there's a delay for some reason.
What's your recommendation?
It sounds fine to me.
Okay, he's okay for everybody else?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
Okay, then go ahead, Dan.
All right. So no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. I call the meeting to order. We'll take our roll call. Richard Clark.
Here.
All right. Steve Wetruba.
Here.
Guy Horn.
Here.
All right. Mr. Bill LePage, member, is not present. We've got Bill Scanlon.
Here.
And Michelle, hello. All right. First item on our agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from February 24th, 2021. Has anybody had a chance to read those, and can I get a motion?
Chairman, I would move that we accept the minutes as recorded for the February 24th, 2021 meeting.
I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes as submitted. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. All those in favor, we have to do our favorite roll call vote. Richard?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Guy?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Passed unanimous. We have an A&R plan, 61 Airport Road, assessors map 227, lot 6, Ruta Realty Incorporated. I believe we have a guest with us tonight, Bill?
I'm Bob Reuter. I'm here.
How you doing? Welcome.
Thank you.
Want to give a quick rundown of what you're presenting?
Well, it's a block parcel of land that I own off Airport Road. It includes a 3-family home that I currently live in. And I want to separate it into 2 parcels. One would contain the house that I live in, and the other one would be a separate buildable lot.
And that lot includes the existing garage and then all the land behind it?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Does the board have any questions?
Mr. Reuter, isn't this land part of the pre-approved open space residential subdivision?
Yes. It would allow us to make that subdivision happen.
Okay, so this wasn't done before the approval of that subdivision?
No,
Okay.
but the subdivision never included the 3-family home.
So if I'm following your logic, Guy, it probably should have been done prior to?
I would have thought so.
Well, we weren't sure we were going to be able to sell the project, so it didn't make much sense to spend the money to subdivide it and all of that beforehand. But now it looks like whether the project goes or not, I'm going to do this A&R subdivision.
Okay,
If the project doesn't go, it still leaves me with a buildable lot, which I might build on for myself. If the project goes, it makes it happen.
okay, so you want to make lot one where the house is the 23,010 square feet, and lot two is the 3.99 acres?
That's correct.
Okay. Wasn't there some more property for the open space subdivision that would have been attached to this down at the lower bottom, Bill?
Yeah, there's some adjoining land that is owned currently by my brother and his wife. And we have an agreement to transfer this into Legacy Landing if and when we get a purchase offer.
Oh,
And
okay,
that's on the advice of our lawyer. He said,
okay,
don't make any moves until you're pretty sure it's gonna sell.
okay.
Because if we
Where's the frontage for lot two?
lot two, the frontage is
Here, Steve.
about 100 feet.
Next to
I'm
the
sorry,
three,
Bill, how many feet are there?
73.02 plus 29.94 is 102 some odd feet.
Okay, and that's res 15 over there?
It says on the plan,
Yes, I believe so. I had the same problem with that frontage. It's just the way that the engineers put the.
yes, res 15.
You have to add the two.
So it has 100 feet, which is required, the
Okay.
minimum required. Plus the area.
Are there any waivers being requested, Bill, or is everything pretty much straightforward?
No waivers were submitted.
Okay.
So
Steve-
where that land is, where the existing garage is shown, if the subdivision ends up getting done, you basically, you're taking that garage down because the road's gonna come right through there, right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
If there are no further questions, and get a motion to accept?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the plan of land, A&R plan of land for, it's Ruta Realty, Inc.
Yes.
All right, I have a motion to accept the A&R plan as shown from Ruta Realty, Inc. Do I have a second?
Second,
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor will do a roll call. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, I had been advised as an abutter that I should recuse myself. I will abstain.
Okay. Steve?
aye.
A guy?
Aye.
And myself also an aye. So 3 approved, 1 how do you say that? 1 is abstain.
Abstention?
Easy for you to say.
It's too late for this stuff.
So Dan,
All right,
I'll have
thank you so much.
Michelle leave the A&R Mylar and the copies in the police lobby for
Okay,
the board to come down and sign.
Yeah.
And then when that's done, Michelle can notify Mr. Ruda that the plan is ready to be picked up.
I will.
we only have to sign the Mylar. Is there something else we have to sign as well?
3 paper copies.
Okay,
Would
so
I
we'll take care of that.
be signing that, Bill?
No, Richard.
Michelle, will you put that in the lobby tomorrow?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, moving right along. We have item B is discussion of the Complete Streets program. Is that on, do we have a guest for that too as well? There we go.
Yes.
Hi, Gemma.
Hi, nice to be back. I have a PowerPoint to share if you're able to give me the opportunity to do that.
Sure. 1 sec.
And I also have 2 of my colleagues here, Robert Raymond and, oh, sorry.
Okay, Gemma, you are now the host.
Okay, awesome. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Beautiful. All right, let me just try doing that. Okay. Can you all see that screen?
Sure can.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm actually here with two of my colleagues, Faye and Rob. Oops, I forgot. um, and Faye has been helping a ton with the data collection, and Rob worked on the Complete Streets program in the past. So he's kind of here to help, bring up some other options of what other towns have done, and bring in some of that context to the conversation. So I watched your guys' last meeting. I thought that the conversation you had there was really great, talking about those 5 projects that you were kind of interested in. So I went off of that, and there was a couple things about the actual Complete Streets program I wanted to cover again, just because it's been a really long time. I think about 4 meetings now since we talked about that program, just so you kind of know what the funding looks like and how you apply to it, just really briefly. And then basically I kind of did an overview of photographs and some measurements of those areas you had talked about. So I've got a lot of slides here, but I'm hoping that we can kind of use those to lead to some conversation about the project elements that would make most sense. I can take that back, put it into an actual draft plan. And then the next meeting would be you guys, kind of reviewing that plan. I'll try to get that to you before the meeting as well, and making any adjustments to that, and then voting on it that day, or we could push it to the next meeting if there was additional adjustments that were going to take a little extra time. So just a quick recap of the actual program itself. So you're working on right now the tier 2 priority plan. And then when you're done with that, you would submit it to Mass DOT. There's usually a little bit of back and forth with them. So they'll have some edits and they'll send it back. You fix those things and then resubmit. And then you would get tier 3 status. And the kind of few things to understand is, tier 3 status doesn't necessarily mean that all the projects on your plan are very competitive. It just means that they've approved your plan. All of the projects are eligible. And then you can go to apply for them each of the 5 years that the plan covers. And, make your case. So you still want them to be, as competitive as possible. So the way to do that is kind of make a concerted effort in your project descriptions to consider all users, within the spirit of the Complete Streets program. And then particularly for Dudley, I think, making the case for safe routes to school is a great one, right? You've talked a lot about the different schools and, creating that safety for students. And, that's a piece of this that you can play up to try and, make your projects as competitive as possible. Just a quick recap of the funding. You can apply for up to $400,000 of construction costs each year. That does not include engineering costs that would be needed for that. What that cost for engineering is depends on the complexity of the project and the internal capacity of your highway department, but you can usually estimate that it's about 10% of the total project cost. And then communities may be able to use their Chapter 90 funds to do that. So that could be one way that you kind of worked different grant programs together to make these projects happen. So diving into, what the projects are going to look like, it's a prioritization plan. So every single one of these projects doesn't have to be fully laid out. This is what each project is going to look like. And I would say that this description is even a little bit long. Some of them are really short. They're just a couple sentences. You've ranked the project in terms of priority to the town. You've given it a name, a quick description, and this description can include things like if feasible, right? So there might be some projects in town that you're not really sure, you really do need to have an engineer look at it and, understand what are your options there. What I'm thinking of in particular is that spot in front of the graveyard where you've got that really high elevation sidewalk. So, you can certainly include that in your plan and have that be something you'd like to, improve as part of this grant, and it fits with the what the grant can fund, but you might have to put it into your plan as, if feasible, we'll do something like this or something like this. The last piece is the next piece is the geography. So you guys on your last meeting had talked about coming up with projects, and I guarantee you that with those 5 projects that you talked about, that will be broken down into many, many more projects because, breaking them down into smaller bite-sized pieces gives you guys a little bit more flexibility each year when you go to apply, so you can kind of pull in the projects that make sense. Maybe you have some underground work going on or some resurfacing going on, and you want to pair that with those complete streets projects. You'd be able to do that more easily, by breaking the projects out a little bit. And then the last piece are these project element codes. And that is this list of the things that are fundable through this grant. And, again, there's an element of coverage here. So you might, when you do the engineering, you might find, well, we can't do sidewalks on both sides. We can just do sidewalks on one side. But you would want to include the element code there so that you would be eligible to apply for that. So basically, what I'm hoping to do by kind of showing you these, images and measurements of the areas you had talked about is pin down what are the element codes that you guys would want to include in your plan, and what does that little project description look like, so that, we can bring it back to you and finalize something that makes you eligible to apply for projects. This is just a little bit, well, actually, I'll stop for a moment and just make sure nobody has any questions.
I'm good so far.
Okay, great. This was a little bit for fun because, you had talked about, we've got a lot of old narrow roads. This is just an old map. So kind of to validate some of those difficulties that a lot of New England towns have. And as we go through, I'll talk a little bit about some of the road widths and things like that. So these were the areas that I focused on, 4 corners to the high school. And I believe this was the areas you had talked about in your last meeting. Does that match up with what you guys had in mind?
I would say so. Let's see, the high school to Mason Road, 4 corners to the high school, 4 corners. I'm trying to, which of these would cover that area in front of the cemetery? I think that was one of our concerns. And
The first one, right?
yeah, is that the first one, 4 corners to the high school? Okay, so
I
that's
think
the
so.
4 corners at Center Road, Dudley Oxford Road, and Dudley Hill Road?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, there's quite a lot of slides here. So, I'm going to just show you them, make a few remarks, and then give you some chance to kind of talk about, your thoughts. So this is the first, that's that intersection there. So this is the section that I'm talking about as I walk you through. You can see the end of the sidewalk that's in front of Nichols College here in the green. There's one ramp there, which is it does have a detectable warning pad, so it's in pretty good condition. And then you've kind of got nothing. So
excuse me, if I may, Gemma.
Yeah.
I actually took some pictures of this area without as much snow as you have, but one of the crazy things that I find is we have a very good sidewalk over here, if you will, on the Nichols College campus side.
Yeah.
And as you say, we have nothing, and we don't have a crosswalk coming across there. I thought the logical thing would have been to continue the sidewalk on that side, so there wouldn't be need to cross all 4 roads in order to get to the other side, to the adjoining sidewalk. But I mean, a lot of this is from in that area, I think, is just connecting the dots. And there are sections and there's emptiness, if you will, which is overgrown and has collected a good deal of litter and is rather unsightly in many cases. And then there's another sidewalk. It's a patchwork that, I don't know, it looked like somebody either did it in stages or had no plan for completion.
Yeah, so that's one thing that you would want to think about. So basically, so if you're going down this road, Dudley Oxford Road, starting on Center Road towards the high school, you start at Nichols College, where there's a sidewalk on your left side, which is in very good condition, right? It looks to be pretty new. And then you get to this intersection of Four Corners, and then you kind of have nothing for a bit. And then you come to, on your right side in front of the graveyard, a little section of sidewalk, then nothing for a bit for a while more. And then you've got the sidewalk that's kind of associated with the schools there. And that's a pretty substantial section of sidewalk. So it's really you're right about making that connection there. And I think one of the things you would have to think about is, where would the crossing point be? Because I'll just skip down to the graveyard, which is actually the next slide. So this is, the graveyard, where there's this kind of problematic sidewalk here. One of the things you could think about doing is actually, getting rid of the sidewalk on the graveyard side altogether and moving it to the other side of the road. And it is pretty narrow road there. So you would, this is the right of way that Mass DOT has on file. So there is some room to go into the right of way there. Anytime you go into the right of way, there's the conversations that you have to have with the community, and sometimes they're totally on board and sometimes not. So that's always something to consider whenever you do that. But, there might be an opportunity on the other side of the road here. Actually, I wish I had a little bit better of a picture. Oh, there you go. On the other side of the road there, to put a sidewalk instead of this side. So that kind of goes back to, yeah.
If I may, I'm going to interrupt again. I apologize. I think it's fortunate that we have Michelle with us, because as I understand it, Michelle, when after the trees, there were trees here at one time, Emma, were taken down, there was a plan, and I know COVID probably got in the way of that, to do something, and hiring a landscape architect, as I understood it, and rehabilitating that area. Did that include the sidewalks, Michelle?
At this point, we spoke to a landscape architect who will be doing a plan of the cemetery only.
Not the sidewalk.
Just the cemetery and beyond the stone wall. Okay. So it does not include the sidewalk that I'm aware of, unless he's going to incorporate that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, given the fact that there's a cemetery, there are a number of graves. Honestly, if anyone were looking to access a cemetery, having a sidewalk there seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a couple options here. And I'm sorry, Michelle, did I cut you off there?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
There's a couple of things to think about here, right? Do you want to try and, work with an engineer and think about a way to make the sidewalk on the side where the graveyard is work? Or do you want to try and work around that and put a sidewalk on the other side of the road? That's also a workable solution. And then the other kind of component that comes into that conversation is, where is the crossing point? Because, again, the sidewalk is on the Nichols College side here, and then it goes to the side of the road that the high school is on here. So at some point, there needs to be a place where pedestrians can safely cross from, having the sidewalk on one side of the road to the other. If you have that crossing point at Four Corners, then you would, have the sidewalk on the side of the road with the graveyard. And if you had that crossing point further down, then you could potentially have the sidewalk on the other side of the road away from the graveyard. If that makes sense.
No, it does.
What I wouldn't recommend is I'm not going to say I wouldn't recommend, but if you were to put a crossing point at this intersection here, so the next intersection is this, little island there. If you were to put a crossing point there, you would definitely want to think about visibility, because coming around that corner, coming from the high school, right? Like this corner here, I don't know if you can actually see I think you can see my mouse, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. This corner here, you go right into that intersection, and it's, pretty much no visibility until you're kind of in there. So there would
But there is
definitely.
a stop sign there. You have to come to a stop right there.
Oh, is there a
Three-way
stop?
stop, actually.
Yeah, that's a three-way stop, that intersection.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Sorry about
But
that.
to Gemma's point, I think she's spot on in terms of that intersection is this funky kind of thing with some elevation issues, and visibility is restricted. The four corners is much better visual, I think, for anybody driving on that four-cornered intersection in terms of any pedestrian crossing or attempting to cross.
I disagree. I disagree with the idea of trying to fix that pathetic sidewalk in front of the cemetery there. I mean, that photo that she showed shows how narrow that is. I don't see how you widen that and make that a substantial sidewalk without undercutting into that stone wall, which I'm sure nobody wants to see that stone wall messed with. So, I mean, I think that would just be a major problem that's why that elevation is so crazy the way it is now. It's because nobody wanted to dig down, because you would destabilize the stone wall. Whereas on the other side of the street, there's nothing there.
Mr. Wetruba?
What's that?
The alternative then would be to leave that as is because it's too fragile to do anything with?
Or take it out, like she said, take it out completely.
Take it out and do what? Level it?
No, seed it. Let grass grow there. There's already vegetation growing down to the road right there. And that's falling apart anyways.
Oh, it is, definitely.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that if you were to talk to an engineer, they would say that there's some real erosion issues here. It would probably be helpful for the survival of the wall to have grass growing there rather than a sidewalk that is having stormwater flowing off of it and potentially causing some erosion. But this is one of those places where you could put in your project description a caveat that you would want to consult with an engineer to think about, where that crossing point would be. And we'd still budget for however many ramps we would need to make that crossing point work, and for the sidewalk reconstruction to make that work. But, you could, work with an engineer and talk about what's feasible. Because, I'm limited in being able to say what you do about something like this, but it certainly is something that Complete Streets should be able to help you with. This is about, making pedestrians more comfortable in the space. That is at the heart of Complete Streets. So yes, I don't know if that is what you want to go with, if you want to kind of, write it up in the plan as something that you would consider the crossing point and consider where you would place that sidewalk, depending on how likely it is to salvage this. Does that make the most sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me just go back because I clicked ahead a little bit and make sure I didn't miss anything. The other thing I'll say about the crossing point is, you might not want to put the crossing point, if you do push the crossing point further down, you might not want to put it right, at the corner there in front of the stop sign. You might want to put it a little bit further up. So maybe, a little bit further up than where I am here. So that, you just have a little bit more visibility of the cars coming around the corner. So that would be another thing to think about. But the other thing with this piece of the road, this I would say is your biggest challenge in terms of connecting these pieces of sidewalk. And I know you had said, right, that the probable reason why they don't have sidewalk here is because the road is so very narrow. And, at this intersection, you do have, I think it's 30 feet in width and a little bit 23 feet at the narrowest point. What I would think about with this intersection is that there's an opportunity to actually do a little bit of reconfiguring, because even though at this point you've got 23 feet, you've actually got about 50 feet all the way across here. So, there might be an opportunity, for example, to turn this into a T-shaped intersection, or there might be an opportunity to narrow or reconfigure the structure of that island to be able to afford a sidewalk without even moving into the available right-of-way. So there is an available right-of-way here, at least based on the Mass DOT data. But, this is a historic area. I don't know I think you had mentioned last time that there might be some difficulty actually widening the road itself there. So I do think that there would be the potential to put a sidewalk in there without even expanding into the available right-of-way, just by reconfiguring the actual intersection. And there might be some safety elements coming out of that as well, in kind of, calming the traffic around that area. And making it a little bit clearer for drivers as well. And again, with intersection reconstructing like this, this is going to be a constant theme throughout this. There is the element of bringing in your highway department and bringing in an engineer to kind of ultimately make the decisions about what's the safest thing to do. But those are, the elements that I would suggest putting into your plan.
When I initially brought up my concerns about this intersection not being wide enough, my recollection of how close that stone wall in front of the old town meeting house was to the road was wrong. I've been by there several times since then, and now I look at it and I'm like, I don't know how I had remembered it so poorly. But now when I look at it, to me, it appears like there is enough room for a sidewalk to go in front of that property and make that corner and then go down and connect with the existing sidewalk that goes to Shepherd Hill.
Yeah, so I'll show you the next piece there, because you guys had talked about this being the narrowest, but I actually think this next piece is even a little bit narrower. So actually up in this top corner here, and it's a very small segment that it gets quite narrow. And then just where this little arrow here is, you've got a sidewalk already. So everything from there and beyond would just be a sidewalk repair. And actually the road gets quite wide as you move towards the school. But right here, it is quite narrow. I'm not sure what this property is here. I couldn't really tell.
It's the back of the golf course.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But on either side here, so this would be a place that you would probably have to look at if you wanted to put a sidewalk in there, actually, expanding the actual, width of the road into the available right-of-way. So I would say that that's probably one spot where that would be something you'd have to consider, given how narrow the road is. Although, again, you could work with an engineer and they might be able to provide you with a little bit more of, if there are some other feasible options. But I would imagine that, that would be a bit tricky without going at least somewhat on either side into the available right-of-way. Any additional comments on this section? I think we're.
Well, that section, I assume I think we're assuming it's part of the golf course. That's pretty much overgrown. It doesn't look like there's anything that's been done to that property other than, again, it's the collection point for litter. That's about the usefulness that it does seem to have.
Yeah. So yeah, that I would just say you definitely, anytime you go into the right of way, there's always going to be a conversation with the property owners or into the available right of way. And that would be an area I would definitely think that might have to be a conversation. A little bit further down the road, you can see how wide it's gotten here. You might even want to think in places like this, which are in a school zone. And, these very wide roads are, probably going to kind of encourage speeding. There might be opportunities to narrow the lanes here. There might be opportunities to improve some of the, even include a bike lane here or some kind of, leading up to the school, right? If you're having kids funneling into the school, a little bit more amenities for bikes here, narrowing these lanes a little bit, but ultimately, the main thing would be to improve the sidewalk there, make sure that there's ramps where they're needed. So I wonder if there are any thoughts about this particular area.
I kind of like the idea in terms of the bike lane. Now, there are lights there as you approach that the school entrance that flash at during the school hours or once dismissal or when the kids are coming in. And I think it supposedly drops the speed limit down to 20. I don't think anybody, except in the mornings pre-pandemic when parents were dropping kids off, that anybody went through there at 20 miles an hour. But it was a pleasant thought in any event. Most people are going through at the continuation of the 40 or 35 that they will be approaching that area in. But it occurred to me that if we were able to, as you mentioned, the width of the road, and as you continue down, you're coming towards Dudley, coming towards Charlton Street, and you're into, and then Pierpont is not too far down the road, you're coming into some of the more scenic areas in town. And a bike path from Nichols in that direction going towards Oxford, taking the left perhaps towards Pierpont, and one of the few scenic roads in town is Hayden Pond Road, up in that direction. If I were biking in Dudley and I weren't concerned about being run over by somebody doing 40 miles over the speed limit, that might be an area that I would go. Again, there are a couple of swans that have taken up residence in one of those ponds. It's an open area. It's again part of the more scenic, I think, in town. I suspect that a bike lane might work there.
I don't get it. You guys are talking, I'm sorry, not you guys, but there's talk of a bike lane going to where? We just talked about that. That's the narrowest part of the road right there, 23 feet. So you tell me how you safely come down to this bike lane you're talking about from Nichols College when you've got to go through 23 feet where we're trying to squeeze in a sidewalk. So
Well,
I just don't see the bike lane as being feasible. I'm sorry. I'm all for
I'll
bike
grant you-
lanes,
I
but
grant you there's some issue there. But if you're going to put in a sidewalk, then you could have your pedestrians bring the bikes down, walk the bike from the Nichols College area, or they could come down part of the way. And then as you can see, the roadway does widen out, and then it does go down towards the ponds and towards, again, the more scenic areas in town.
Yeah, I'll be right there.
Yeah,
I'll
so
be there too.
I'm sorry. The first comment, I only have a handful of people. I couldn't see who said that about the bike lanes, but I agree with you that there is, there's an element here of, well, if you're going to have bike lanes, they better be very connected, right? They better, bring people on any road wherever they want to go. There's kind of a trade-off when you're looking at places where you can put bike lanes in, putting them in there. Eventually, people are going to hit a dead end, right? That bike lane would not be there to get people necessarily from Nichols College all the way down to the school. But what it could potentially do, because that is a school zone, is make it a little safer for kids biking from their homes and surrounding neighborhoods. And then also I was thinking about this, it looks like there's an athletic field there. There might be an opportunity for kids to take their bikes from their school to the athletic field. And like have that be a route that kids are using, kids on their bikes. So yes, you're right in thinking that when you're thinking about the network and connecting all these key places, it's a lot trickier because there's that very narrow piece of the road further up. I still think that there's some benefit to start putting bike lanes in, especially in a school zone where kids are funneling into the area. And also, I will say that including those bike elements does, help to show that to Complete Streets that you are thinking about, making accommodations for all of those different users. And then maybe in the future, people are starting to get acclimated to the idea of bike lanes. You can start to think about, maybe making more efforts to connect it to other places. So that's what I would say. I admit that it's not ideal. And Rob, you have something to add to this?
Yeah, and I think for a section of road like this, you might not necessarily need to make an on-street bike lane, but you might be able to make an extra wide sidewalk or something like that with maybe a bike area marked, so that going to school, if a lot of people are walking or there's a large crowd, maybe after a game or something like that, the sidewalk can accommodate larger groups of people walking. But if someone is biking, there is kind of an extra space on that sidewalk for them to ride along safely. Almost like a bike path, if you will.
So I'm wondering if there's any, certainly this is an area where there are a lot of trade-offs. I'm wondering if there's any consensus or if this is one that you would be wanting to keep out entirely. You really just don't want to put that bike path in the plan, or you would want to, put it as an element. Again, put it as an element. I would say that a bike path that's painted on is not a very expensive element. It wouldn't be a huge part of your project budget. Probably would be a little bit more if it was, widening the sidewalks and including part of that as a bike path. So yeah, is there any consensus on whether you'd like to include that project element code in this project?
I'd like to hear what Dan and Guy have to say because they've been quiet.
I would say that we have to start somewhere. I mean, I don't know of any, other than probably in front of Nichols College, I don't know of any bike paths anywhere in the town. So I think if we don't start somewhere, you got to start someplace. If you get a 1/4 mile bike path, from Mason Road to the high school, or from, the high school up towards the golf course, or to that soccer field that she just pointed out. I mean, it's something. And then there's always the opportunity to add on at a later date. But if we don't ever make the provisions for it now, I mean, we're just going to keep going down the road where we don't have any bike paths. So if we put one in now, it only gives us something to grow on too. That's my opinion.
And I think that was well said, and I agree. We have to start someplace. Here is an option, and why not? But just backing up a second, for some reason, I was under the impression that we were kind of providing, providing priorities of areas that we'd like to see improvements made. And then I don't realize that engineering isn't part of the program, but still handing it off to someone who would be better equipped to make the more technical recommendations that we could follow up on. I just see us getting into a lot of weeds. I don't know are we tasked with the goal tonight of plotting out exactly where we want the crosswalks to be and how wide the sidewalks are supposed to be, or?
No, you're definitely not tasked with, knowing all of those specifics. With the Complete Streets Plan, the whole idea is to look at the entire town, take a full survey of your sidewalks, what exists now. And then, they kind of provide you with those element codes so that you can think about what types of things you want to do, and that you can, work through the projects in a more organized way, if that makes sense. So, it is noteworthy that, we at CMRPC are not the engineers who look at all of these details. But this is a way for you as a town to kind of identify priorities, start to think about the types of things that you need as a town. And the vehicle to do that is kind of through identifying the geographies that you're interested in, which is really what we did last time, and the kind of project ideas you're interested in, using those element codes to kind of build that out and make this funding available to you as well. Another piece of this is, getting to the point that you can apply for grants.
And I would assume that whenever as far as construction is concerned, there's going to have to be some kind of engineer drawings so somebody can figure out what the heck they're actually putting down. So with that almost given that we're going to need to go to an engineer at some point in time, I agree with the fact of us saying, look, we'd like to have a bike lane here is a great place to start. It's a great tool to narrow the width of that road and make everything a little bit more safe. We are looking for sidewalk connections, but as far as exactly where that crosswalk goes, on what side of the road the sidewalk might be best served, that's kind of, in my mind's eye, something that an engineer, once we kind of decide that this is the path we want to go, he's going to pick that up. And it just seems to me that we, as far as the codes are concerned, we kind of want to add as much into those codes as we want, and then have that engineer sift out what is not feasible or can't be funded. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fine line between sort of coverage and, when you do submit your first draft, making sure that, the feedback you get from Mass DOT is not, well, why did you just put every single code in there, right? You do want to have, a thought out kind of idea of, you as residents seeing folks walking around in this space, seeing where, the hazards are, taking into account the data that we collected about your existing sidewalk network, and kind of, identifying, what your wants and needs are and how you're prioritizing things. But yes, I mean, I would tend to err on the side of putting projects into the plan, rather than not including them, because you don't ever have to apply for the projects that you've put in there, right? But over the 5 years, you can't apply for a project that's not in your plan.
Understood.
So I would say that it sounds like you're interested in putting a bike lane in there as part of this.
I would say in some format, yeah, either as part of the sidewalk integrated or it's just simply painted on, whatever an engineer might think is the best method here.
Okay, sidewalk.
And then we're prioritizing sidewalk. So, right?
Exactly.
Right.
All right. So I don't think there's a whole, I did remember one thing here. So this is just at the school. One thing I would definitely look at here is a crosswalk crossing over the entrance to the school and ramps on either side of that. Another thing you could also think about is putting a little bit of a pedestrian refuge in the middle there. So basically what that is you kind of extend the island out and create a little sort of midway point, makes it a little bit safer, especially for students to kind of cross one segment and then the other. But I would say at minimum there, you definitely want to do some sidewalk improvements and a crosswalk and ramps. And then, thinking about the bike path, you might want to think about, the bike path going up into the school as well, continuing up. And then maybe even, some bike racks at the school or something like that.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so this is kind of the next piece.
Well, I'm not speaking for the whole board. I just want to make it clear.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to move on too quick, but
I think if you don't hear any feedback from the rest of us, just drive on. We're doing good.
Anything? I sorry, and please do slow me down if you need to. But yes, the next segment is the high school to Mason Road. It's a pretty small segment. There is sidewalk down the entirety of it. The road is fairly wide on most of this. The sidewalk could use, a little bit of an upgrade. I think there's 3 ramps that are currently not ramps that could, we could install ADA ramps there. That would make things a lot safer. But there's not a whole lot here. I would say, if you wanted, you could probably continue the bike path up this road. And those are, yeah. So I would say that right off the bat, I would definitely do sidewalk improvements, ramps, and then potentially if you wanted to continue the bike lane up there, it looks like there would be enough room to do that. All right, I'm hearing silence, so I'm thinking that sounds okay to all you.
I don't want to be the one to go, oh yeah, sure, great. Constantly. But yeah, the bike path, I was saying, you got to have it go somewhere. Right. And I think Richard was mentioning that that's the area that once you continue down this road, you start getting into that more scenic area where you've got the ponds and everything. So it would be a great place to be able to to ride.
And then if you go further down, you take the left, Pierpont is a very wide roadway. And that again goes out to an area that is approaching, again, one of the few scenic roads in town, Hayden Pond Road. You're maintaining something that would be somewhat reasonably interesting to someone riding on a bike as opposed to just dodging traffic.
Right, right. Would you be interested in adding that as a project element, including a potential bike lane going down? Did you say it was Pierpont Road?
Pierpont is actually a conservation area on one side of that road. It's a 3.5 acre, I think, area.
P-I-E-R, Pierpont. Pierpont, it's just P-I-E-R-P-O-N-T, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Ah.
There you go. Exactly, Faye. Thank you.
And that's a pretty straight stretch too, as a matter of fact.
Okay, so maybe I'll put that in as a project, but I'll put it a little bit further down on your priority list.
Right.
That's something you'd have in your arsenal. So that's all I had for that section. It's pretty straightforward. The next section you had talked about was Four Corners to the Park and Shop. So starting at Four Corners, kind of the same stuff we had talked about. I guess thinking about it from the perspective of going down Dudley Hill Road, you'd want to have on one side of these road, whichever side of the road you decided to put the sidewalk on, you'd want to have a ramp as well as a crosswalk also bringing you onto that side of the road. And if this was your crossing point, you'd probably have an L-shaped crosswalk with sidewalk going down this way and sidewalk going down this way, or you'd have a crosswalk going from here to here with the sidewalk and here to here with the sidewalk. Trying to think if there's another configuration. I think there might be one other configuration, but
Gemma,
yeah.
could you back up to that list, the priority list, just for a second?
Yeah.
I'm wondering from the board members, is anybody else thinking that number 4 should be moved to number 3, that those two should be flipped? The reason why I say that only is because I'm thinking about the number of houses that you would actually have the sidewalk go in front of. If you went from the end of Mason Road to it's not the elementary school, I keep forgetting, it's Mason Road School.
Yep.
But I mean, the population density down there, that's all Res 15 down there. The houses are one right after the other. There aren't too many areas on Mason Road left where you have any stretches where there aren't houses on at least one side of the road continuously, and in many cases, both sides. As opposed to, if you start at the Four Corners, the houses are quite a bit more spread apart. And then you get down by you go by that stretch by the golf course, and then you go down Airport Road. The houses, again, they're kind of spread out. You got Bates Farm on one side there. Those are large lots. And then going down the hill to the Park and Shop, the houses there also large lots spread apart. I'm thinking as far as more bang for your buck, the amount of people that could be coming out of their houses and getting on and off these sidewalks we're talking about, that the Mason Road to the Mason Road School stretch would benefit better from a sidewalk system. Not only that, but it would tie in with the existing sidewalk at the end of Mason Road that goes over to the school that we were just talking about. So does anybody else think that we could flip 4 and 3 priority wise?
I think that's entirely reasonable. I would add one point with regards to the Four Corners that we've looked at, and I assume the thought was that students from Nichols College would be using that as an access point. Gemma, am I?
I'm sorry. So you're talking about using it going down to the park from Nichols College to the Park and Shop?
Right.
Yeah.
Is that the assumption?
One other thing to consider there, and I'll skip a little bit forward. One thing to consider is that you might want to, so when I was in that intersection there, the Tanyard Road, Airport Road, Dudley Hill Road intersection, what it looked like to me is that most of the Nichols College students, just based on the footprints in the snow, were actually coming out of these fields here.
Mhm.
So it looked like what most people were doing was walking through these fields and then walking down this segment going towards the park and ride. And there was that segment of Airport Road, you could really tell that it was being used by pedestrians, right? There was footprints and kind of packed down sand on both sides of the road along there. So it might make sense for you guys to prioritize that segment of the road above, for example, this Dudley Hill segment of the road. Because if you're thinking about this as a route for Nichols College students to get to downtown, to get to the park and shop, it seems like what they're all doing anyways is cutting through this field.
You're making my point. Thank you very much. I would submit that you do see some on Tanyard Road, if you will, because if you look at the campus over here, to get to Dudley Hill Road, they have to go some distance from where the dorms generally are located. So being teenagers, I think the inclination is the shortest path is the best option. And as you indicated, they found one, and then the alternate would be Tanyard Road.
Yeah. So, it might be more worthwhile. I didn't actually walk up and down Tanyard Road and take a whole lot of photos there. So there might be.
Wear a safety vest if you do.
Yeah. So there might need to be a little bit more investigation there, but it might also be that you would want to encourage them to take this path. Maybe there's a little bit of collaboration with Nichols College to make this path a little bit more established, because I did get the impression just from sort of being on the outskirts of Tanyard Hill Road, looking down here, I did walk a little ways down here and a little ways down there, that it's a very hilly road. It's got a lot of curves. There's not a lot of good visibility. So it might be that, you would also want to divert students to this path that's very much protected for pedestrians. But
this might need some work. That outfield gets pretty wet in the spring.
Right. So that's not a project that's fundable by Complete Streets because it's not, town property, but there might be an opportunity. I know with the Webster Dudley corridor study, there was some collaboration with Nichols College. So there might be an opportunity, if they're doing any repaving of their paths or something that, you could talk about them, creating a more substantial path there, that would kind of encourage students to use that route rather than Tanyard Road, which might be a little bit hazardous. But the ultimate, implications for the Complete Streets plan is that you would prioritize the further down segment of Airport Road kind of over the upper section of it.
To get back to the original question, I think what Steve brought up is instead of going from or putting Mason Road as a priority over Airport Road, my understanding was that one of the reasons we put Airport Road as a priority was that it was easier. It's wider, first of all. You've got a sidewalk in some portions of it, and Mason Road is going to be a bear to tackle.
Yeah. So, if you were to put, what you could do is put the later section of Airport Road, which is wider and might be a little bit more, it might be a bit easier to go for with sidewalks. And then you could put Mason Road in between, and then you could put the upper sections below that, if that makes sense in terms of priority.
Yeah,
right?
Oh, is there sidewalk on Airport Road?
Up into the parking lot in front of Park and Shop, there's a bit of a sidewalk there on that side.
Oh, but there's
But
nothing.
getting back to the Mason Road thought, as Mr. Wetruba has spoken very eloquently too, there's a lot of bang for the buck in terms of population there. We're also talking additional residences on Jesse Road. We're talking more off of JB, and then we've got at 71 Mason Road, another couple of houses that are coming in. So if anything, there's going to be a bigger bang 5 or 10 years from now than there is today. And as someone characterized it, it is a bear, but if you don't tackle that bear now, when are you going to do it? As mentioned with the bike paths, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? And this seems to be a program that gives us the opportunity. That opportunity might not exist 5 to 10 years from now. And again, there's going to be more use of Mason Road given the number of new houses that are destined to come in there in a very short period.
No, I agree with that. And then what we just saw at Nichols College, where the kids are basically using, going around the athletic field to find a different way to get to Airport Road. I think we touched on the idea of using the middle school / high school property as a shortcut to get over to Mason Road and also to get over to Juniper Lane / Susan Drive area. I think there are some existing paths back there. So if we were to try to prioritize those first, we could hit into the middle of Mason Road or the Juniper Lane, and then hit that Jesse Road subdivision eventually, and kind of circumnavigate some of the more difficult spots in Upper Mason Road and hit the easier part of the Lower Mason Road that would get us quicker to the Mason Road School as well as to the pond and the beach. But again, there's a lot going on here, and these would be good items to be talked to with an engineer to try to figure out costs, to try to figure out what would be the easiest to do. And also we have to think about time. If we can get some good bang for the buck in the first couple of years, for example, where we're reaching a certain percentage of people and then go from there, that might be also a nice aspect of it.
But do we have a consensus with the board members as far as flipping 4 and 3 priority wise?
Well, I'm against it.
Okay.
I don't know what everybody else think. You Guy, Richard, what do you guys think?
If I can make a quick suggestion, one thing you could possibly do is this section so, I'm going to be breaking these sections into even smaller projects, right? So this number 3 is going to be like maybe 4 or 5 different smaller projects broken down. So what you could do is you could, think of this as 2 sections. So it's the upper part of Airport Road and the lower part of Airport Road. You could prioritize the lower part that is from that path that the students are taking to the park and ride first here. And then you could have the Mason Road Elementary School. And then you could have underneath that, the upper part, if that makes sense.
Dan, your opposition to the Mason Road, if I understand you correctly, is you just think it's too difficult to do because of how narrow it is in spots. Is that my understanding?
No, my opposition is, I just think that Airport Road is, first of all, going to be easier. Second of all, it's going to be facilitating Nichols College to the parking shop. And third of all, it gets us more complete areas in a quicker period of time. And then if we start to investigate some of the shortcuts through the school to hit Mason Road, instead of hitting Mason Road from the top and trying to work our way down, we'll have a certain portion of sidewalks by the Mason Road School. We'll have a connection from the high school, either to Susan Drive in Juniper back there or to Mason Road itself, and then we can branch out from there.
Oh, okay.
So that's
To
just
me,
what
I'm hearing a lot of I'm hearing a lot of prioritizing Nichols students over residents of the town. That's what I'm hearing.
I would submit, quite honestly, I've lived with probably less than a quarter of a mile from the actual Nichols campus. I don't think many kids go to Nichols, frankly, without planning transportation in advance, and that usually amounts to a vehicle. Given the numbers up there, the number that you'll find walking on a roadway at any given time, and it's seasonal when they do, is very small in terms of a percentage. You'll see them driving, and you'll notice if you look at the campus, there's a tremendous number of parking spaces available up there. Admittedly, there are a lot of evening program people up there that drive in, but I think most kids, when they enroll at Nichols, they've figured out some kind of a transportation alternative, and walking and bikes, frankly, are not on the top of that list, I don't believe. That's an unscientific survey.
Jim, at the beginning, didn't you say that you were going to like take these 5 that we started with and break them down into more detailed projects?
Yes.
After that, couldn't we then, after you got all the smaller projects broken out and spelled out basically for us, couldn't we then go in and give you the list of priorities from that rather than try to do it now?
Yes, absolutely. So, you could really be very detailed about how you want to prioritize those things in terms of the very, tiny little pieces, thinking of it as like Lego blocks kind of. I would recommend you kind of keep similar projects together, but, you could certainly in a where you have those kind of clear segments that have kind of clear different functions, play around with those. Because like you said, the Mason Road also kind of has two different segments, right? There's the upper segment of Mason Road, which is being used, but it's maybe not as used as that under segment if you were to create a connection through that neighborhood there for students to go from the high school to the middle school. So you could take those 4 different sections that we're talking about and then kind of play with the arrangement of those, once we actually come up with the plan. The next time you're going to see this, it's going to be in an Excel spreadsheet. I can easily copy paste a row of cells in a little bit higher up or a little bit lower up. So if you want, we can put a pin in that, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Yeah, and I think it's also good to note that also when you submit your final list to Mass DOT, they don't hold you to the order that you list the projects in. They ask you to rank them in order of priority, but there's nothing that says you can't. If project number rank 20 is ready to go, you can apply for project rank 20, and they won't hold it against you that you're applying for the 20th project on the list, because they're just trying to get projects out the door.
I have a question for you guys. How do you get public input from the people who actually live in the town? I mean, I'm talking about these ideas, and you guys have ideas also, and we're going back and forth about this. And the truth is, we're just a few guys that live here in town. And I'm wondering, for all we know, there might be somebody who might feel really strongly about wanting a sidewalk somewhere, or they might feel really strongly about not wanting a sidewalk somewhere. At what point in the process do we hear from the public? And how do we get that?
One of the most successful public outreaches that I saw as part of Complete Streets was the town of Sturbridge. Once they had their draft list together, they posted it on their, I think it was the town or the planning department's Facebook page.
Okay, yeah.
And the comments on that went crazy. It was pretty unbelievable, to the point where there was a project that wanted to bring a sidewalk up a school. That was similarly a very narrow road. There were wetlands in the way. And basically people were commenting, take some of my front yard and build the sidewalk, because they wanted it so badly. So I think definitely Facebook is a great way to do it. You definitely open yourself up to arguments and things like that. So, using however the town kind of controls that or post things, that's a great way to do it. We might be able to create some sort of web map with the proposed projects that people would be able to see and maybe vote on or comment on in a way like that. It's kind of tough with the whole COVID environment. Most of the times we would have in-person public meetings. The town of Millbury tried to do we did a charrette style where the projects got posted up on a wall and people had dots and they could, assign their dots to their top projects, things like that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Complete Streets, the requirement for public outreach is pretty minimal because they really want towns to be able to get these plans out the door. But it's also the more public outreach, it's better, right? To have people's input. And that's kind of, up to you guys as to how much you want to kind of put in the effort to really circulate this around and get that public comment, and we can help you set up some kind of structure to do that. What Rob was mentioning with the interactive dashboard, so we actually do have the interactive data that we collected, and what we could do is like add another layer on there that would have the actual project geographies, and then you could click on it and have a little description of the project, maybe a photo or something like that, and then an opportunity to put comments. So yeah, that's certainly something we could talk about, some of those tools that you guys could use and create, and that I think that would be wonderful. If I can go on, if nobody else had anything to say on that particular topic. Okay. Where am I right now? Four Corners to Park and Shop. Okay, yes. So basically, this is what it looks like. It's pretty narrow. This is the upper part of that. So it's a little bit more difficult in the upper part of that road, like we had talked about. But again, there might be an opportunity to kind of prioritize the lower part of that road. All right, I just have to get resituated. Okay. Nope, where am I? Okay, yes. So this is probably the narrowest part. It's in the upper part of the road. You probably would have to go somewhat into the right of way here if you wanted to do a sidewalk there. And then this is that intersection. So this is where things get a little interesting again, because you guys had mentioned that this is a pretty hazardous intersection. I definitely got that impression when I was out there walking around. And then, this is where Nichols College students are coming out of to walk to the parking lot. So there definitely is folks walking around here just based on the sort of like tracks in the snow and tracks in the mud, which is very helpful in some ways. We don't usually do this in the snow, but it was helpful in some ways. So, one of what I would put in for a project element here is, looking at the reconstruction, how can you, reconstruct this intersection to be a little bit safer? So these are some of the ideas that me and Faye had talked about. Potentially, there's a number of different ways that you could think about reconfiguring this. The theme of the day is that, you'd want to consult with your highway department or an engineer. But one way that, is kind of one that is very common is to actually turn, instead of having this X shape, you turn it into, sort of one road with two T-shaped intersections. So instead of having it be an X, you actually have a road with, a sharp turn here. They'd have to stop and then turn onto the road as if it was a typical T-shaped intersection, and then another T-shaped intersection there. And you could achieve that by, including, basically bumping out this piece of land here. And a more affordable way of doing that, rather than actually, kind of creating a new segment of grass, might be to do something like this, where you're just using, especially in a place that's, not right in your downtown, you're not necessarily needing to create these like big pedestrian spaces to congregate. You're creating some kind of, markings, and maybe using some, more low cost options to kind of delineate that space. But, basically looking at how you can reconfigure it, include some additional signage to make it a little bit safer, and also be able to fit the sidewalks in there. So any thoughts about that? Yes?
Yeah, there are already signs indicating this is a dangerous intersection. I don't think anybody pays any attention to them. One of the wild cards here is the golf course parking lot. The people coming and going out of the golf course parking lot, as I've observed, having lived here about 40-something years, they don't pay any attention to any stop signs. They just think it's freewheeling, and whenever they want to go, they go. And there are, as you've noted, there are stop signs on the roadways, but these guys are just free agents. They are beholden to no one other than themselves.
I mean, I don't even know why that parking lot is that wide at the road edge. There's no delineation where you're supposed to go in or go out. I see lines painted on that parking lot, but I mean,
Exactly,
you're absolutely right.
You're making my point. Thank you.
When somebody is leaving that parking lot, they basically just, depending on what direction they're going, that's what angle they're going to leave that parking lot at. They don't come out straight and come to a stop and then make a very distinct left or right turn. They just kind of go on. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So I don't know if there's a way to fix that. I mean, I'm wondering how much of that edge of that parking lot is actually on town property right there.
Yeah, so well, the right of way here, I'm not, it's actually a little trickier because this is right at the intersection. But, again, anytime you're going into the right of way, you would always come across, working with the community. So you'd be working with the golf club there. But one of the things is we had a town in North Brookfield, they had park. They had a grocery store that had two entrances. One was an in and one was an out, and they really wanted to swap which one was an in and which one was an out. That wasn't really, in their, it's kind of something they need to work with the grocery store on. But we still included it in the plan, because it's kind of all encompassing of what you think is ideal. And then, it's something you can work on when you eventually go to, do that project. So I would say, it's worthwhile to include in there that you would want to, if feasible, narrow that opening, and, maybe add additional signage or something like that. I wonder what you guys think about the idea of, kind of using these sort of more low-cost solutions to, basically making it more clear to cars that they have to take a sharp corner, right? They can't just come around the corner, sort of fly around the corner, but you're creating a T-shaped intersection. They actually really have to come to the corner, stop. It's not going to be the same as a T-shaped intersection on any other street, but using some of these more low-cost solutions to create that effect, and that could provide some traffic calming.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, it's definitely low cost. Looks a little better than Jersey barriers. So.
Yeah, anything that slows traffic down is good.
Okay. All right. And then we had talked about this already, kind of the two segments. There's this one, and then there's the one that's post where students come on. This is just continuing down. This road is a little bit wider. I definitely think there's the possibility to put in sidewalks here. That brings you to the park and shop. And then the sidewalks don't actually start up until you get pretty far down here. This is where the sidewalks start that bring you on to Main Street there. So, basically ramps and things like that would be in that location. Okay, next segment is elementary school to Mason Road. So I'm starting here at the fire department where there's a sidewalk here, but it doesn't actually connect to the little bike trail here, which is not a goat path. It is actually paved, which is wonderful. So, creating a actual sidewalk here that would connect. This is the fire station, so I would think that would be potentially doable for you, but creating a sidewalk here that would connect the existing sidewalk to this little bike path here. It would have to go across the parking lot here, so that's one thing to think about, just making sure that there's enough markings there that it's clear that there's pedestrian, there's a space for pedestrians. Anything about this corner here? Any thoughts?
I think that makes a lot of sense, frankly. Just continuing where you have obviously something in place now, but as mentioned before, there are these segments, but they're not connected to anything. Making that connection seems almost like a no-brainer to me.
Right, and I it's a very small segment, so it would be pretty low cost, I would think. Then you get to the elementary school here. This is in front of the elementary school. This is town owned, so you could add a sidewalk in front of there. And at least that would, get kids all the way into the elementary school from Main Street. And then starting at this corner here, at the stop sign, that's where you get into the very dense residential area, with fairly narrow roads. So, I think you all know it's tricky.
Guys, that school's the kindergarten, right? Is the kindergarten in first grade? It's been a while since my kids went there, so I don't remember. Does that
Actually includes preschool.
Yeah, preschool, kindergarten, and first grade.
Great. So Gemma, you might want to just keep that in mind. The locals call it Mason Road School, so they pretty much all know it by Mason Road School. If you continue to use elementary school, that's going to confuse people because the elementary school is actually on School Street in Dudley, nowhere near this area.
Okay, that is good to know. So it's preschool, kindergarten, and first grade, you said?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the other thing here, with the sidewalks is there's kind of a double, they'd be doing double duty, especially the ones coming up from downtown, because the path to the beach is behind this school. And the parking for it is the school parking. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But those sidewalks would be, I would imagine, doing quite a lot of work. So this is just looking at the width of the road here. I would imagine that there would at least be some places along this segment of the road. So it's a pretty small segment, but it's very densely packed. There's a lot of houses there, going from Jesse Road here to where the school ends. That I think would be, potentially tricky to fit a sidewalk in there, but not impossible. You might have to think about going into the existing right of way in some places, that you might also, be able to avoid that.
Is this 26 to 28 feet the narrowest?
Yes, 26 is the narrowest.
Okay, because we were talking about 23 feet in the first thing that we talked about earlier this evening. We were talking about 23 feet that we were gonna get a sidewalk through. So I think that 26 to 28 feet, if we could do it where there's 23 feet, we sure as hell can do it where there's 26 to 28 feet.
Yeah, so I mean, the difference between them is whether or not you have to you can put the sidewalk in where there's existing pavement, or whether you have to actually push into the land on either side, right? So you have the room with the right of way, right? You have a right of way to do that, but you'd be pushing into what people are kind of what are currently people's lawns, right? So whenever you do that, it just makes the project a little more complicated. So, in that 23 feet section, you would definitely have to, and I think it was just one property owner there. It's just the golf course. So that makes it a little bit easier to do that. Here, you definitely want to work with an engineer and think about the widths all the way down, and where you might have to think about, actually widening the road, and where you can put a sidewalk in the existing paved area.
Gemma, mentioned earlier, if you look at Jesse Road here, there are going to be houses built in that area. So there's going to be still more population using that roadway, and I'm sure accessing Mason Road from Jesse Road. So I don't know we have no sidewalks on Jesse Road. That may be something that needs to be considered at some point too. And this is a very densely populated area to the left of Jesse Road as well.
Yeah, and what I would say for Jesse Road is that most likely Jesse Road is enough of a, very, there's not a whole lot of traffic on Jesse Road at all, right? So when it comes to pedestrian amenities, you don't always need sidewalks, right? What you could do a wider shoulder, you could put some signage that, relates the fact that these are shared spaces, that these streets are being shared by, cars and people. So you could put some of those things to kind of reiterate the use, but it is also possible that you could just, widen the shoulder or something like that on Jesse Road and have a pretty safe, given how quiet the neighborhood is, and low cost way to connect to a potential path here.
I appreciate what you're saying, but Alton Drive feeds onto Jesse Road, and I think Michelle might have been involved. So a couple of years or so back, there's additional signage that was added to Alton Drive. There was the neighbors were en masse in protesting the number of speeders that were coming through, and the density. I guess
they even tried speed bumps there. I remember that.
Yeah, and they tried speed bumps in there. So there's been a lot of effort to mitigate that, and what may look to be relatively unused is on its way to becoming a fairly major artery, if you will, and an access point to Mason Road. Again, more houses being built. That's an area that's seen a lot of traffic and a lot of, apparently, parents feeling a lot of dangerous traffic in that area in particular. And it is very heavy in terms of the signage, and it's a 25-mile-an-hour zone, and it's noted on a number of signs that this is a dangerous area.
Not to mention the subdivision that is pending over there. We just
Right.
extension on
And
it.
there are no sidewalks at Alton Drive nor on Jesse. So I think what drove the thing actually is a lot of small kids, little kids, if you will. And there's nothing there but a road and a yard. And as soon as the kid leaves the yard, he's in the road or she's in the road.
If I could, at least from my experience, I know all you really need is about a 10-foot wide travel lane. So if you were to kind of road diet what's currently existing to 10 feet, you'd be able to at least accommodate a 6-foot sidewalk on the existing roadway. So maybe you could take that as an opportunity to both do some traffic calming just by narrowing the lanes and be able to put in a sidewalk connecting to Jesse Road.
Well, Mason Road's definitely gotten a little too quick for, I think, the taste of most of the people living on it. As far as anybody who wants, I think anybody who lives on Mason Road will tell you that they feel that people come too fast down that road.
And,
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry.
Guy, you want to jump in?
I was just gonna say that, I don't know if everybody, Dan, I don't know if you remember or not, but I believe one of the conditions that we did make on the Jesse Road subdivision was that they were gonna build sidewalks down the cul-de-sac and all the way down Jesse Road to the end of their property. So that would probably be about half the distance of Jesse Road. So there will be a sidewalk installed there.
Well,
That's
good.
correct, yes.
And there is existing, so if you can see this gray here, that is sidewalk.
Right. So the new subdivision would start right where Alton Drive and Jesse Road starts there. So they would complete the sidewalk from that dot about halfway down Jesse Road to the end of their property. That was the agreement that we made when we approved the subdivision.
Okay, that's good to know. So then would the main piece here, and I'm trying to visualize what you're saying. I wish we could be in person and looking at a big table map right now, but so would there?
Where they, if I just may, you have Jesse Road is written, and where the R and the D are, right about there's gonna be a new road going south into that vacant area towards the main street.
No,
Okay,
Other
here.
way. There you go.
yeah,
It'd be about, I think there's 16 houses located down there. And then facing Jesse Road, you have the new road itself. I can't remember the name of it. And then you have 1 or 2 houses on either side that face Jesse Road. And there will be a sidewalk built from that new cul-de-sac to the end of those 2 houses. So to Guy's point, it's roughly halfway up towards Mason Road, and I think it's halfway back up towards Alton as well. Correct, Guy?
Yeah, but I believe they agreed to go right to the corner of Alton Drive for the sidewalks.
Okay, that's even better then. Okay, perfect.
So would it span the entire way, or it would start about halfway and then go to?
It would start from Alton pretty much, and it would go maybe 3/4 of the way towards Mason.
About here,
A little bit further.
about here maybe.
Yep, something like that.
All right, so maybe we just put in for sidewalks on that little remaining piece at the end there.
Yep.
As one of the projects. Let me just write that.
And to Faye's point, if we want to try to get an engineer involved and try to figure out how to, if the narrowing those lanes will actually slow traffic down through there.
Right.
The danger with narrow lanes, of course, is that if you have pedestrians, but if we're offering them a nice wide sidewalk, we're kind of alleviating that danger right there, just causing cars to go a little bit slower. I think that's the idea.
and to Dan's point, I think that's also how you win the hearts and minds of the people living on Mason Road, convincing them to, have what technically is town right of way, but they have grown to treat as their own front yard, giving that up for the sidewalk. And the idea being that you're going to just make it safer for anyone traveling on that, any pedestrians traveling on that road, and possibly also slow things down on that road.
Right. All right, so just to mention a little bit about this idea, I think this is a great, really low cost idea that makes a lot of sense. The main sort of caveat here is the ownership. So, obviously this is, I believe this is a public road, or is this a private road here?
It's public.
Okay, so you've got, public road here, and then you've got the town owned here. But there is the question of this little segment in between. So, there would be need to be a discussion around the feasibility of that. And, kind of, if it's not town owned, you would have to probably fund that piece of it out of the town's, maybe you could get an easement or something like that and fund that small piece of it through the town's budget, and then fund the rest of it through Complete Streets. So you'd have to kind of think about that. You'd have to work with whoever the owner is. So just kind of a heads up around that. I can definitely put it in the plan, but there would be a little bit more legwork on that one. What was I going to say here? I think this was kind of just trying to show the road, the second half. So this is the part, you might want to prioritize this higher up section of Mason Road if you were to, so as you go through and you're applying for projects within the 5-year period, and say you go for this project and you make it work and you create this little path that connects you here, then maybe you wait a little while longer to apply for projects here. The other thing to think about on this upper part of the road, you might want to weigh the idea of, instead of having sidewalks, doing a wider shoulder, and including some pedestrian signage there. If you wanted to make sure that all of the residents there who were funneling in and making their way up to the high school and middle school, or making their way down to Mason Road, would have that kind of safety, but you didn't want to go all in for sidewalks on a pretty long chunk of road. There would definitely be, some cost. It would be a very expensive project. It would have to be broken up, I would guess, into, maybe 2 years of funding, right? You apply for one half of it 1 year and the other half another year. So, you might want to think about, well, do you want to scale it back by making it a wider shoulder, or do you want to put it a little lower on the priority list and kind of focus on the idea of trying to make something like this work on that upper half? I would say those were the kind of things to think about here.
Jim, if I may, I believe that water and sewer is going to be working very extensively in that area within a fairly short time. I don't think the timing is such that we could piggyback on top of that, but it probably would have been ideal if we could have.
Right. I mean, and if you wanted to, you could probably work with your highway department and see if it would be feasible. If you wanted to just do a wider shoulder, you could work with the highway department and see if, if they're digging up the ground anyways and they're repaving, maybe they would be willing to, install that wider shoulder, which is basically paint on the pavement. It's very low cost, to kind of start building out this project, not necessarily tapping into Complete Streets funds yet, but kind of start building out the vision. That might be something to think about.
You keep mentioning shoulder. Where is there a shoulder? The shoulder is somebody's lawn, I suspect. Is that it?
Yes, actually, I should clarify. So a shoulder would be created by basically delineating a line, right? It's basically just a line on the road. I think there is a shoulder right now, but it's very hard to see under all the sand here, and it's very, very narrow. But the idea would be, you're improving the actual pavement itself. So maybe moving the pavement out, even a foot on either side, and then creating a stronger line here that's a little bit wider, that narrows the lanes and gives a clear kind of walking space for bikes or people. So if
I think the lines would be ignored, and effectively you'd be just widening the road and doing the exact opposite as far as what we were talking about, narrowing the road to slow traffic down.
Yes, so that is the trade-off right there. It's just a line on the road, so people can ignore it. you know, it depends, you know, on your perception of the traffic there, how busy it is, how fast cars go. And I don't know, Rob or Faye, if you have any insight on other towns and what their luck has been with doing a wider shoulder, maybe on a road like this, and if they have any luck, have had any luck with traffic calming with that.
At least from some research that I've done, people have done, you know, they've painted the shoulder a different color. Obviously with signage, there's opportunities to do a textured cement or asphalt where you can actually imprint like a brick pattern or some sort of pattern that clearly distinguishes it from the roadway. There's opportunities to implement, you know, flex posts or some sort of like temporary physical barrier between the shoulder and the roadway that prevents people from driving onto it. I know flex posts are a pretty low cost option. Those are also used heavily to separate bike lanes from the travel lane. So I think, you know, a lot using paint and some sort of temporary physical barrier are kind of really great options while you're kind of figuring out whether you want to put in sidewalks or not. And it could also be used kind of as a demonstration to, you know, you could take the time to really look and see if people are using it as you intended it to be, if there's people walking on it, and just kind of see if it's even worthwhile putting sidewalks there.
Also, an allowable expense under complete streets is for speed readback signs that display, you know, how fast people are going versus a speed limit, things like that. Sometimes those work. Sometimes people just use them to see how fast they're going and see if they can go faster than the speed limit. I do a lot of traffic counting for the commission, and I think one of the best ways, you know, whenever we do a traffic count for a speed study to see if they need to change the speed limit, basically it never works in the way the town wants. It always shows that the speed limit should be raised or that it could be raised because people are going faster on the road anyways. And really the best way to get people to slow down is to pull them over and to have the police department enforce the speed limit. And eventually once people start getting tickets, they pay a little bit more attention, I find, to the speed limits and things like that.
But just a question, you indicate road width here. That is the paved width of the road, 25 to 28 feet?
Yeah. So I did that actually using, you know, the satellite imagery. So it's basically a picture, and then I actually measure it. You know, it's
Okay.
a digital tool, but it's
I
basically
submit, and I'd have to get out there with a tape measure, I suspect, to prove the point, but I believe that there are points on Mason Road that don't get close to 25 feet.
Yeah, and there may be, you know, I didn't measure every single piece of the road. I kind of just eyeballed it visually and tried to find what looked like the narrowest point to give you a range. But, you know, you guys know this area much better than I do, so there may well be some narrower points along here. But again, you know, whenever there's those narrower points, the conversation turns from, you know, building sidewalk on the existing paved area to, you know, going into the moving into the existing right of way, and or if you were to do a wider shoulder, you know, increasing the width of the actual road itself, and then doing the shoulder. So I wonder, is there any, you know, are you guys leaning in any direction when it comes to what kinds of things you'd be interested in doing along this upper part of the road?
Speaking for myself, and I travel that probably every morning, I love Mr. Watrova's thought in terms of slowing people down. I don't know how to do that. I do like the idea in terms of enforcement. That would be nice. I doubt very much you're going to get much of a buy-in on that in terms of the local authorities. I don't see them on Mason Road. I've had experiences on Airport Road. I live about 0.2 of a mile from the golf course, and somebody came through when they had one of those machines that was reading the speed at 74 miles an hour, coming from the golf course less than 0.2 of a mile to where the machine was located. My assumption is they never stopped for the stop signs. And obviously, if there'd been traffic coming through that intersection, we would be talking fatalities at the least. Mason Road isn't quite that bad, just because it's got a few more twists and turns to it. But I routinely see people that are coming down that road well over the 25 or 30 mile an hour speed limits as posted. And there are people walking those roads, that road in particular. There are dog walkers out there. There are people in the morning, they're out walking that road. And I know it's mention of a shoulder here, but I think there's a precious little for them to dive into should somebody be coming at them.
Right. Any other thoughts on, the sort of trade-off? And, the other thing you can think about is if you do want to work with your highway department in the interim to just create a wider shoulder as much as possible, that could be sort of a temporary solution to make things potentially a little bit safer for folks there. And then in the long term, you could include in your complete streets plan, you'd like to actually have sidewalks there. Is that sound like, kind of the direction? Are you going in the direction of wanting to try and put sidewalks in there as a project? And, understanding that it would be a pretty big cost. You'd probably have to do it in segments. But, that would be, kind of more what you think would be workable in the area.
I think sidewalks and Mason Road are definitely our goal. We understand that it's going to be difficult and take a little bit longer, but I think that when we're all said and done, that's what we want. I mean, am I right, guys?
Steve, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. My thinking was that, yeah, if we can't get the sidewalks in on Mason Road, you might as well just leave it alone, because I don't think those other things we were just talking about with the shoulder and that are going to work. My experience has been that when you're going down Mason Road, and I've seen other people do this too, if cars are coming from both directions, people just step off the road completely and onto the grassy area, which is technically a right of way, but it's almost like they're in somebody's yard. I mean, that's what they're doing to get out of the road. There's no place to go.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can see actually even here, there's some footprints. So then I'm going to put it in as sidewalks. And, another thing I'll say is that, and I'll go into this a little bit on the last slide, but, because Dudley's existing sidewalk network is pretty sparse, and most of what you're doing is not actually going to be sidewalk repairs. It's going to be new sidewalks. Those are more expensive projects. So your projects are going to be broken down into smaller pieces. And that means that I would really, suggest some potential other grant programs that you can kind of pair with this, particularly the Safe Routes to School program that might be able to kind of get you a little bit further each year when you apply. If you decide to apply for Complete Streets grants, you can pair that with another grant and, have it be a little bit more of a significant impact. So I'll mention that on the last slide. And then I also was thinking on, the next meeting of kind of going over some of those other grant opportunities. You've done a lot of thinking here. I think this is great. And, you want to bring in the public input as well. But also these are big projects. They're expensive projects. And Complete Streets is going to help you a lot, but it's only going to get you so far. And so there might be some other opportunities to, make much more of a significant dent in all of this. Okay, so this is just, there's not a lot to say here. This is just kind of looking at the more further, I kind of broke this into two pieces just to kind of, recognize that there's a little bit, maybe some difference of width and things like that. But I think it's basically the same story as the last slide. And then you get back to where the sidewalk starts connecting to Dudley Oxford Road, which has a sidewalk that goes all the way to the high school. All right, there's not a whole lot left to go, but the other thing you guys had talked about was the actual path. So right now there is not an entrance. Right now there is a snow pile. But this is technically the entrance to the beach. This is the path here. And this is approximately the route that you would take to the town beach. So, I would definitely recommend that you put this on there as one project. Paths like this are a bit more expensive. So if you were wanting to fund this, it might be sort of a 1-year project that's funded. Although it's not that long, so it might not be quite as much as some of the other examples that I'll show you in a minute. But yeah, I would say, you can this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You can put it on there as a project, a little bit lower down on the priority list, potentially, that, would be a shared use path that goes through here and just kind of improve that. This is another place where you might want to think about other grant programs, maybe like a park grant or some kind of grant that you can do, a little bit of work on this playground here or on the actual town beach, maybe an MVP action grant, something like that, to kind of pair with the path. Or even to fund the path itself. But certainly I think it's worthwhile to put on your plan as something that, is part of that, bigger vision of the things you see as worthwhile to be doing. Any thoughts on that in particular? So the other piece of that is just this road. I think it's Delaney. Did I say it correctly? Delaney?
Delaney, yep.
At Delaney Ave. This to me seemed like it wasn't a very highly trafficked road, but you could think about, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't live here, but just from being there taking photos, it didn't seem very highly trafficked. You could think about doing a wider shoulder there or some signage, letting people know that they can walk to the beach there. There is no park. There's a lot of no parking signs around here. And I would imagine that there might be, there might have been some maybe issues with the neighbors and things, not wanting to have a bunch of parking, coming down there. But you might think about maybe putting in 1 or 2 spots that could be handicap spots, and then having, some kind of, if you do look at other grants that could fund work on the beach itself, having some ADA improvements there. So there's a couple little things you could think about with this road. I wonder if anybody, if anything there sparked any interest, or there's any thoughts on this road in particular.
I know the police don't want people parking there, so, and I think you're absolutely right. I think it's the residents in those last couple of houses right there. They just don't want to have to deal with that. So that's, for the longest time now, that's pretty much been known. I mean, occasionally people will still do it, but usually not for long periods of time, I don't think. During the day, during the summer, when things are in full swing there, I think for the most part, the police are pretty good about keeping that under control and making sure that people don't park there. So I don't really think you're going to be able to make the idea of a couple of parking spaces over there fly. I might be wrong. As far as much traffic there, I would agree. Vehicular traffic, probably not a lot, but pedestrian, quite a bit. There's a lot of people walk down. I don't live too far from that street, so that's one of the walks we like to take, is down to the beach and back. And we see a lot of people walking on Lakeview. As a matter of fact, that's why Lakeview is nice to walk, actually, because of the fact that most of the traffic is up there on Mason Road.
Right. So, I mean, I would say on streets like that are already quite walkable, maybe the most you would want to do is a wider shoulder and some pedestrian signage, but, some signs that say share the road or something like that. But if it's working already, and it's not hazardous for pedestrians, I'd say there's not a whole lot, in my opinion, and Faye or Rob, feel free.
Yeah, I would say leave that alone. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think we need to. We're already trying to get a lot of stuff going that, it is pretty expensive. So that's really low priority to me on that side of the beach.
Okay, I think I'm gonna move on to the next one and anybody chime in if you want to go
Oh,
back.
goodness.
Yeah, so I know that this wasn't really what you hadn't discussed this at the last meeting, but we had talked about it a little bit before. And because it was such kind of a problem area, I just wanted to like go down there and take some photos. You know, it is pretty incredible. You really, I was definitely feeling unsafe, a little unsafe myself. You kind of have to pop your head around and then pop your head around again and then make a run for it. So, I would say you might want to put this as a project pretty low on your priority list. If it, it sounded like in your last meeting, it wasn't really something you were super focused on.
Only because it would be so difficult to fix. I mean, the more I thought about it, I just couldn't figure out how you would fix it. And the truth is, I see a lot of people stepping out into the road coming around that corner. There's a lot of people that are using that sidewalk right there in front of that building. And having to step out into the road and go around that corner of that building. A lot of people that live in those houses over there that are walking downtown to get groceries or whatever they're doing, or to the donut shop. I don't know where they're going, but I see a lot of people walking that route, and they all have to step out into the road around that corner of that building.
And how many, if I may, how many apartments are we going to be putting into that mill?
Oh, yeah, right.
200 or so.
Good point. You got a better chance.
The traffic you see right now is probably only a fraction of what is likely going to be there in future.
Gemma, could you back up to the photo right before that from the other direction?
This one?
Yeah, you've got a better chance of convincing the mill developers to open up that window into a walkway, so you actually walk through the building and go out the window on the other side as another opening and continue the sidewalk. You get a better chance of that happening than fixing that intersection.
Yeah,
I mean, great idea.
I would say I asked Rob actually before this to take a look at it for me as well, and we were racking our brains for ideas. In my mind, the only real option here would be to, put aside either, keep the sidewalk here and then put a sidewalk on the other side of the road as well, or remove the sidewalk on one side, on the current side, and put the sidewalk on the other side of the road. You may be better off just putting another sidewalk on the other side of the road, and then at the end of here, maybe you put a crosswalk, right? So if you're on this side of the road, you get to the mill, you're stuck, it's a literal dead end. You can cross the street onto another crosswalk on the other side of the road. And then maybe a bit further down where you've got the entrance to the office building there. Let me see if I've got a photo of it here. So you've got the entrance to the parking lot of an office building, and I believe their entrance there is a little further down. Maybe you put another crosswalk here. You've also got this road here. Put another crosswalk here for whoever was wanting to walk on this side of the road and got diverted onto this side of the road. They'll have a chance to go back onto the other side of the road if they need to.
If you locate the crosswalk, that first crosswalk down the other end, if you locate it where you were talking about, it almost looks like people would have to step out from behind the building into the crosswalk. So I think cars coming from the other direction, it would be dangerous to put a crosswalk in the area where that fire hydrant is going across there. Not only that, but putting the sidewalk on the other side of the road, you've got a big problem. There's a stone wall that is where the river goes under the road right there. And that stone wall is like right up to the paved. It's really close to the road. I don't think there's enough room there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I will not argue that this is not a tricky situation. And I will again bring up the point that, there are very many places here where it would be great for an engineer to take a look. Whether this project actually comes up as one that you want to apply for and that, that happens, or the highway department comes in and thinks about, solutions with that. I don't know. It depends on how much you'd like to prioritize a solution here. Rob, did you have anything to add here on what maybe some of their options might be, or do you think I covered it?
I mean, I think you covered it. I know Ian had mentioned kind of that the mill development is underway a little bit. And I think, sometimes if people are willing to work together, you know, maybe they could do something to help out, throw some money at it themselves, you know, because there's a big economic incentive for them. But beyond that, you know, moving the road would cost an astronomical amount, you know, to shift the road over. So sometimes you just can't get a sidewalk in the best place. So this might just be one where, you know, like you mentioned, bring it on the other side and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, I do think that this will probably become a problem for you in the long term, and there probably will need to be more discussion about, well, is there something that can be done here? And it might be that there needs to be a little, you know, well, what, you know, more people coming in and saying, well, this is the real problem. Can you put signage somewhere? Can you put you know, any kind of markings on the pavement, you know, maybe some like, not a speed bump, but sometimes they'll have like you can, you know, what it's called is slipping my mind, Faye, maybe you remember, but basically where there's kind of a texture on the pavement that you kind of alerts you that there's something you need to pay attention to, maybe a couple of signs that kind of alert drivers that pedestrians will be there. And, you know, as this, you know, as the developer comes in and you're bringing more and more people into here, maybe then you have those conversations about, is there any way we can slow drivers down here, make them aware that there's going to be people that have to kind of go out into the road and run around, put some kind of marking on the road to, you know, maybe even just some X. You know, if you've ever seen an intersection, they'll paint sort of like a crosshatch there to kind of show cars that they shouldn't stop there.
What would be great is if we were able to work with the developer and get them to basically divert all of the pedestrian traffic to the backside of the mill. You have a river walk. You have a path along the river on the backside of the mill that the pedestrian traffic could use to go around the backside of the mill and then come out of that parking lot on the back of Tri-County and connect back up with the existing sidewalk system for that section down there on Mill Street. But that's a conversation for another day, obviously. Dan's rubbing his eyes. We got to get the heck out of here.
Yeah, and this was indeed the last slide, so I'm glad that you're tired out. But I just wanted to kind of put it out there because I do think in the future it will probably be another conversation. I'll say you can look at this, you know, on your own once this is posted. But this is basically just kind of like showing some examples of what the price tag is on different projects, just so you can get a little bit of an idea of like how much could you actually apply for. You know, you've got a lot of projects here, and I think that's good, right? You're thinking of this in a holistic, kind of all-encompassing way. But you know, realistically, how much could you actually apply for each year? And is there other grant programs you can use to supplement that? I'll talk about that a bit more at the next time we meet. So yes, that is kind of all I've got to say. Is there any last remarks or would you guys want to schedule the next meeting to go over the plan for your next planning board meeting, or do you want another kind of time in between? Is that workable for you?
Bill, how's our schedule looking in the next week or so, or the next meeting? We going to be pretty busy, or?
No, Dan, we're pretty open at this point.
Okay. What's the board's pleasure? What do you guys think? Try to do it next time? Try to keep on going with this? We got
Sure.
some good momentum going?
Yeah, if we've got the time, because, you know, spring's around the corner and things might start getting busier.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would agree with that. That'll be the 24th then, right?
Is 2 weeks enough time for you, Gemma?
Yeah, I think it should be okay. I mean, I have a lot of information already compiled. The main thing is going to be trying to do the cost estimates.
Okay.
Thank you, Gemma.
Yeah, we don't, if it's too short of a time, please let us know. We're not trying to work you to death or anything. We do have some good momentum here, and it's obviously we got everybody's attention. We're all kind of good to go on this. If you could also, I'm intrigued by the idea this is a competitive grant. So I know you mentioned a couple of times of making our proposals look competitive and look a little bit better. I just would like to get in that a little bit more next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think next time I'm definitely going to want to chat more about that as well as other grant programs that could, go into this.
Excellent. All right, thank you so much for you and your team, Faye and Rob. Really appreciate you guys hanging in with us and all the hard work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank
Sarah,
you.
can you transfer the host back to me again, please?
Yes, let's do this correctly this time.
Thank you. Good job.
Sorry, one moment. Town of Dudley. Oh, did that work for you? No,
Well, I don't know.
I think I may
What-
need to exit.
Why don't you take your share screen down, okay?
Yeah, I think that might be the issue.
For some reason, this doesn't work. We just got a short meeting.
Wait.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the host yet.
Here we go. Town of Dudley, and I'm going to make you the host.
Okay. Yes. Did it. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we're good, Dan.
Thanks. All right, we're looking for the next item. Let me pull up my agenda. We want to have a preliminary discussion of Tobin Farm Estates, the street acceptance. I don't believe the developer is here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we still want to discuss quickly or do we want to table that?
It's up to the board.
I just wanted to mention that in lieu of the fact that I thought we might be discussing it, I decided to go through Tobin Farms and take a look because I hadn't been there in quite a while. And the only question I had, I know that like one of the last things we had been talking about that needed to be finished were guardrails. So I did see guardrails in one section, but there was another section where there's a similar crossing and there aren't guardrails there. But I honestly don't remember because this development predates my time on the board. I don't remember whether or not there's even supposed to be guardrails there. So I didn't know if Bill had a way we could look at the plan and just take a quick look and see if they're supposed to be there or not.
Well, Bill, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the standing that the plan did show guardrails going over those wetlands on both sides. So there's two roads on both sides of each one of those roads, but there was some agreement reached with the developer and the town.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Don had negotiated something with George Slingo on that. Let me see if I can find that memo.
So that Summer or Sumner Lane section there are guardrails there where that crosses that
The wetlands. Yep.
wetlands. But then over on the end of Tobin Drive, that section there where it goes down and crosses the wetlands, there are no guardrails there. So that's the only question I had.
Steve, was that on the Tobin Drive side? Is that as big of an embankment or less?
I would say it's about the same. It's big enough. The way it is it's a big retaining wall that was built on both sides that was filled in with earth for the road to be able to go across there. So what you've got is you've got a situation where the edge of the paved road ends, and then you've got some grass or vegetation for several feet, and then there's the drop off of that retaining wall. And I would say if you're walking down Tobin Drive towards Stebbins, on the left side, I'd say that's at least 6 feet, and on the right side, I'd say at the max is probably about 8 feet down to the water.
Okay. Well, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, common sense would dictate, why would you drive off the road anyways? Well, if you lost control of your car. And then you would think, well, why would you be possibly going fast enough to have that happen on such a short stretch of road coming up to a T intersection? So there's plenty of argument for saying that, oh, well, maybe that's overkill to have the guardrails there. On the other hand, then why were they asked for on the other side?
Right.
So this, can you see this Word document?
Not yet. I'm still looking at the plan. I still see the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yep.
So this was a memo that Don wrote to the planning board back in July of 2018 regarding, the arrangements for completion of the road after discussing it with George Slingo. And this said, construction that George will complete: 1, prepare and complete construction of guardrail on Stebbins Drive / Summer Lane, and to install guardrail where called for on Tobin Drive, subject to financial arrangements, see below. So that's kind of where it stood a couple of years ago. And I know George has been working on the guardrails. That's kind of why I wanted to see if he could come tonight just to discuss what the status of this is. But Steve, you're saying he hasn't completed that second guardrail?
Yeah, there are no guardrails on the section of Tobin Drive that crosses that wetland area.
So again, what do you want to do then? Do you want to have George add that or not, I guess is the question.
I'd like to know what the other members of the board feel.
Well, I would think if you got an 8-foot drop off, you need to have something.
I mean, I will go back there and I will take a tape measure and I will measure the drop on both sides, because I'm making an estimate. I could be wrong, but I mean, let me put it to you this way. I wouldn't want to jump off of that wall from that height, not at my age anyways. And if it was a kid, I don't think they should be dropping off that height either. But
I'm a big believer that if it's on the plant, it should be built. Simple as that. But I know there was discussions before, this board was obviously.
That's exactly my point, Dan. I'm not clear on exactly why they haven't been done. My thinking is, and it's unfortunate that he's not here tonight, because my thinking is, did someone from the town say that didn't need to be done? Is he under the impression that it doesn't need to be done? And if
I have
somebody
a feeling
gave
there
him
was
that
some kind of
impression,
deal made that they didn't have to.
yeah,
Yeah,
if there was
I
a
don't know
deal
that.
made, then we need to know about it, because then we can just say, well, hey, if somebody already said you didn't have to, then I don't think we should hold him to doing it. On the other hand, if he just made the assumption that he didn't have to, well, then I'm with Guy. We should, and you, and hold him to what's on the plan.
I think that you could say that's, you're with all of us in that case. I think that needs clarification at the very least.
Yeah, I think if the only other reason I could think of it as to why it's not done is it could be just financial. They ran out of money and it was never done. So they're, like pretending that it didn't have to be done.
Well, I can see whether he could come to the next meeting, so the board could ask him directly.
Okay.
And if something was, if that was required and it was waived, then if we can't find a waiver for that, then he needs to produce something. It's not going to be just like, word of mouth.
And I almost hate to bring it up, but the other thing I noticed was the ones on Sumner Drive, for some reason, the guardrail on one side is shorter than the guardrail on the other side. Not height-wise, just the length of, the amount of guardrail.
Mhm.
It almost looked to me like they did one side and they started building the other side, and then like ran out of guardrail and said, well, all right, that's good enough. And I, you know, I at that point, I don't want to be picking on anybody here, but
Right.
I've got pictures on my phone. Unfortunately, I didn't think to put them on my desktop and then I could share them with you. But I took photographs of the existing guardrails showing, you know, what they look like. And I took photos of the area where the guardrails don't exist on Tobin. And I even took a couple of photos showing the drop off there where the walls are. But I'll go back out there. I'll take a measurement from the top of that wall down to the water and see what we come up with. So.
Good.
Oh, and one last note regarding Tobin Farms. I will say this. It was funny. There was a bunch of kids on bicycles there, and you know, here's this guy, strange guy in the neighborhood, taking photos. I could hear the young girls, they were getting nervous for their little brothers and that, telling them, hey, come on, get out of there. Got some guy taking photos. And so then I circle around and I'm coming up Tobin Drive, and here comes a car, and this very nice lady flagged me down, smile on her face. And she had already seen that I was taking photographs of the other guardrails where the kids weren't, kind of figured that I must be having something to do with the town. We had a very pleasant, short conversation. I you know, identified myself, explained why I was there. And I explained why I was there, that, you know, that Mr. Slingo is getting ready to go before town meeting and get the roads accepted by the town. And she just couldn't be happier at the news of that. If she is representative of the general consensus of the people living in that neighborhood, they can't wait for the town to take over that development. And you know, they said she even went as far as to say that George has, you know, done his best to keep up with the snow and everything else that's involved with taking care of that. But she can't wait for the highway department to be able to take over that role. So that's all I wanted to add.
Good to know.
All right, next item, submission of Butler Way definitive plan for acceptance and set schedule for opening the public hearing.
Yes, Dan. So as you recall, the board acted on the preliminary plan a couple of months ago. And this is now the definitive plan that is based on that preliminary plan. The regulations say that the clock starts when the planning board accepts the plan as a submission. So that's what I'm asking you to do right now, is to formally just accept the plan as being submitted, so that we can then take steps to have Graves Engineering do a peer review of this version of the plan. And you can set the schedule for the public hearing, get the notices out to the abutters, et cetera, so that the public can come to the meeting and offer their perspectives.
Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
if I may, my look at what you provided, Bill, in terms of documents, I found a word that surprised me somewhat. The word was duplex. I look at the submission. This is the document stamp dated November 18, 2020, Dudley Town Clerk, and noted in there, and that narrative, I assume, comes from the developer. Is that right, Bill?
Oh, I assume so. I'm not sure what you're referring to exactly.
Well, the plan description specifically.
The waiver letter?
No, this is the plan description. This is the document that you provided, certificate of approval, Butler's Way preliminary subdivision.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, so yes, well, I wrote that decision.
Yeah, in that plan description, mention is made, the project engineer made no representation of the type of dwelling units the subdivision would contain.
Okay, I got you.
Back to the September 9th meeting. And that was not an omission. That was very, very precise in the use of Mr. Lavoie's use of the language. He kept referring to lots. And I assumed, and I think most of us did, we were thinking about single family homes. which apparently the revised plan, or the plan that's now before us, is duplexes in 3 cases. I also would refer, if I may, to our rules and regulations, section 3, procedure for the submission and approval of plans, part B, preliminary plans, conventional subdivision, general. The applicant may submit a preliminary plan of a conventional subdivision to the planning board and the Board of Health for discussion, modification, disapproval of each board. And it goes on. The submission of such a preliminary plan, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I have to move down a little bit. It's the section referring to more than one dwelling on a lot. Okay? No more than one building designated or available for the use for dwelling purposes shall be erected or placed or converted to use as such on any lots in a subdivision or elsewhere in the town without the consent of the planning board. Such consent may be conditioned upon providing of adequate ways, furnishing, so on and so forth. If more than one house or residential unit is anticipated on any lot now or in the future on such preliminary plan, those details need to be shown. It is expressly understood that the approval of any lot on a preliminary subdivision plan is implied for one residential unit unless otherwise stated. I'm feeling a little bait and switch here as far as this guy is concerned, because he, again, was very specific, and he noted in his descriptive that no mention was made of anything more than, and the assumption of leaving the board, I think, with the assumption of single family dwellings. So and I questioned at one point I wasn't in attendance for the 9/9 meeting, but I was for the 9/23. I used the word house, and my inference there, I believe, was a single family house. And he did not correct me at any point was the word duplex brought up in that meeting either, to my knowledge, having reviewed the video.
So, yeah, I did talk to Peter Lavoie, who was the engineer from Summit Engineering, who was not aware when he submitted the preliminary plan what type of units were being proposed. He had since found out that there are still 6 lots. 3 of the lots will be 2-family homes, and 3 of the lots will be single-family homes. So there'll be 9 dwelling units on that plan. 2-family dwelling units are permitted by right in the district. So certainly it's a by right use for him to do the 2-family homes. And it's not separate. There's still only 1 dwelling per lot. There just happen to be 2-family dwellings rather than single-family dwellings.
Yeah, but I know what Rich is about to say to you. He's about to say to you residential.
There's duplex, there's 2 dwellings.
No, it's 1 dwelling. It's 2 families.
Yeah, but he says units. He says that the regulations he's reading there say residential units.
1 residential. It is expressly, the wording is expressly understood that the approval of any lot on preliminary subdivision plan is implied for 1, and it's in parentheses, the number 1, as well as the verbiage, residential unit, unless otherwise stated.
So a duplex
does not fit that definition, to my knowledge.
A duplex could be 1 building, but it will have 2 residential units in it. So he's got a point.
Okay, what I'm getting at is the preliminary plan that was presented, and that's the one that state stamped 11/18/2020, is flawed because it does not specifically adhere to the rules and regulations as I just read. I'm going back with the bait and switch thing. I think somebody knew there were going to be duplexes. Whether Mr. Lavoie legitimately did not know and never asked that question, I don't know. We'll never know. But somebody knew. And to the point regards to the sidewalks, they apparently surveyed the area, and I remember they made the comment that there were no sidewalks in the area. Well, I would submit there were no duplexes in the area. They felt sidewalks were inconsistent with the area in which these buildings were to be built, while duplexes, I think, are just as much inconsistent with the buildings in the area.
So the submission of a preliminary plan is not mandatory. It's recommended, but it's not required. He did that because he wanted to discuss the layout of the road, given the constraints that were present on that property. So the point of the preliminary plan is to work out those details on how the road construction would take place. And so we had a very good discussion with him on the issues of sidewalks and right-of-way widths and things of that sort. So now he has the right to, whether you approve that preliminary plan or not, he can come in and submit his definitive plan. So it's not mandatory to submit a preliminary, and he can go ahead and do the definitive regardless of what action the board took on the preliminary plan. So he's gone ahead and submitted this as a definitive plan. And I think it meets the board's requirements for submission. So I think you are sort of bound to accept the plan this evening. You can certainly, discuss those issues with him, the number of units, whether that changes the design of the roadway and the drainage and that sort of thing is, I guess, something you can take up with him.
Can I get a clarification from
Sure.
you? If I understand you correctly, you're saying that even though his preliminary plan didn't follow the rules and regs, that Richard is saying that in fact, we would have to treat it as if he didn't even present a preliminary plan because he doesn't have to?
Essentially, correct, yeah. So
Well,
you can go.
that's nuts. A developer can do that?
You can go directly to a definitive plan without submitting a preliminary, if that was your
Then,
choice.
Bill, if I may, I would submit then, the table is cleared, the waivers are reconsidered, any requests that they've made are open for negotiation and discussion.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Did you guys give him any waivers for this subdivision already?
Over my
Yes.
dead body.
So, they were, I guess advisory at the time because a preliminary plan is not an official plan.
Right.
So you can reconsider them at the definitive plan stage. So he has to apply for them now, and it's the board's decision on the definitive plan that is final. So you could in fact alter your previous decision on the waivers if you wanted to.
So on this definitive plan, are they asking for waivers?
Yes, the same waivers that he asked for and that the board granted on the preliminary plan.
Guy, I was just going to try and look those up for you because
I sent it.
you weren't here
I
during.
believe I sent you that letter, that decision.
Yeah, waiver request. You want me to read these, Guy?
Sure.
Okay, so let's see. This is dated March 1st, 2021. On behalf of our client, Westcott Homes LLC, waivers for the following requirements. Section 4A, Streets 1, property lines at street intersections to be rounded or cut back. Request, allowing property line not to being rounded at street intersection due to the existing lot lines at intersection of parcel with and JB Ave. Number 2, Section 4A, Streets 1J, road cross section. Request, allowing proposed road cross section instead of the town of Dudley standard cross section because of the limited area at the beginning of the proposed roadway. Number 3, Section 4A, Streets 2, with minimum right-of-way width. Request, allowing a 40-foot right-of-way instead of a 50-foot right-of-way due to the existing property lines. There's 2 more. Number 4, Section 4C, open space, parks, and playgrounds. Request, allowing no proposed open space for the proposed project due to the minimum area of the existing parcel and the location of the development. And number 5, and this is the last one, Section 5C, sidewalks. Request, allowing 1 sidewalk instead of sidewalks on both sides because of minimal area of parcel layout and no sidewalks in the area. That's it.
Okay, gentlemen, if I may, in summary, I'm not sure, I think we have dealt with them in good faith. I'm not sure that's been reciprocated. As far as my thoughts regarding waivers are concerned, I have three tests, if you will. One is a waiver might be in order if there's some ambiguity, some uncertainty in terms of the regulation. Secondly, is there something in there that's really good for the town of Dudley? Over and above whatever we might have expected or required. And then the third one would be, is there a conflict between whatever is in the rules and regulations and any other board or department in town? these waivers that they've requested don't pass the sniff test if I hold those three requirements up to the standard that I'd like to hold them to. And again, I repeat, I think they have played a little fast and loose in terms of what they presented in this preliminary plan, and have, I think, again, when they get to the definitive, they have to put that on paper as the duplexes. I think they've, if not misled us, I think they've encouraged us to perhaps look in a different direction. And looking at what I've seen as the plan presented, and I've looked back at the 9/9 meeting and the 9/23 meeting, everything looks like a single family home. If there's anyone saw anything different, I'd like to know.
No, I agree with you. I look back at all of them. When driveways are shown, it's a single driveway going to one side of the house. It's been misleading.
My comment would be, if they went from, they got 6 lots and they basically went from 6 units to 9 units, that's a 50% increase. And yet they're asking to not have to provide a playground or anything like that. Well, if you're going to get 9 units out of it, then you can give up one of the lots that you're going to put a single family house on. You'll still get 8 units, and the town will get their open space.
Hey,
And put the
oh,
sidewalks in.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Bill, just a quick clarification here, because I'm looking at these on the definitive plan that they've sent. They're showing the houses that they're saying proposed duplex. They're showing just one driveway on the front of the duplex. So I think it's safe to assume that they're going on the assumption that this is going to be the typical duplex where you've got 2 entries on the front of the house facing the front elevation. And I thought that there was a rule that said that a 2-family is a permissible use in residential 15. But I thought there was a rule that said that you couldn't have the entries facing, that both entries can't face the street. Am I wrong on that? I thought that was a rule.
For a 2-family, I don't think so, but I'd have to double check, Steve. I don't recall seeing that.
Okay, all right. I mean, that might be more Nelson's, that might be more the building inspector's call on that.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I thought that I remembered reading that somewhere, that there was something that said, basically what it was you could have the 2-family in Res 15, but that you had to build it in a manner so it appeared as if it was a single family from the street.
That usually is a condition for an accessory apartment. I'm not sure it's a requirement for a 2-family house, but I'll double check, Steve. I don't recall seeing it.
All right, but that's just another thing to keep in mind as far as.
If you go,
as you can see, he's got a duplex, and a duplex. So these are the 3 duplexes, and then the 3 single-family homes are on the other side of the street.
mm-hmm. If you go over to what was it, Brandon, Marshall Terrace off of Brandon Road.
Yep.
They bought the lot that was over there, and they're putting a duplex on that lot right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably going to be the same design, where the 2 garages are in the middle and the 2 front doors are on opposite sides of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so sort of like that condo complex that's up there in West Dudley, right? Up near the vineyard, that road that goes up to the.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I don't know if that, I guess if that satisfies the building inspector, then maybe there's not much. The other thing is over there, is Marshall Terrace, is that Res 15 or is that Res 10?
It's I think we changed it to Res 10.
Oh, okay.
It was business 15. The lot that they bought was 12,000 square feet, but it wasn't buildable at 12,000 square feet. The woman that owned the land had enough property to to give another 3,000 square feet, but she refused to do it. She kept fighting us. So we ended up changing it to Res 10 for her because the rest of the subdivision, the rest of Marshall Terrace is all Res 10. It was just those 2 lots that were not.
Okay, all right. So, and then it's possible maybe in Res 10, a straight up regular duplex like what you were describing is allowed there. I just
Right.
thought it was in Res 15 that maybe there was a rule. that
I
made it
believe
different.
I believe duplex is allowed anyways by right in Dudley, aren't they? Bill?
They are correct. Well,
Yeah.
in the residential districts.
Right.
Okay,
Okay, so to try to bring this full circle, if I just ask a quick question, Bill. So the developer is not bound to give us a preliminary plan, but he did. But we are bound by the decisions we made during that process, correct? No. Good, okay.
Well,
So I
yeah,
wanted
I
to
would
hear.
say you look at it with fresh eyes if you want to, but
Excellent.
certainly, you
All right.
did review it previously, so something would had to
Excellent.
have changed for you to change your mind, I think.
All right, so we've got lots of good points that Richard and the rest of the team brought up that we need to discuss. Do I need to get a motion to accept the definitive plan, or is it just on the books?
I would say I'd like to have the board to accept it as a submittal.
Okay, and then how much time do we have for the review?
Well, we have 65 days to hold a public hearing.
Okay, so I would say that with our next meeting being complete streets, we do not want to have a public hearing next time, correct?
Well, I need to advertise. It takes a couple of
Right.
weeks to do that, so you could
So try
do
to
it-
get this sometime into April?
Yes,
Okay, and that would give us time next week to talk about this in more detail, possibly to ask if there's any need, for example, to get any kind of legal assistance as far as the duplex question is concerned. Sounds like it's by right, sounds like we don't have much to stand on there, but I do agree, this was never presented as such, and it's a little bit disappointing that to find out this late moment that it kind of got, quote unquote, stuck in there.
so,
So can I get a motion to, yes, Steve,
so what are we getting ready to vote on here?
to accept the definitive plan?
So,
you're accepting the submission of the plan to start
Yes,
the
you
clock.
just accept, just that we received it.
okay,
If we didn't do it, he could just bring it to the town clerk and submit it to her and the clock would start without us.
okay, all right.
So can I get a motion that we are in receipt of the definitive plan for Butler Way?
Yeah, I make a motion that we acknowledge acceptance, receipt of the definitive plan for Butler Way.
And a second?
Second,
All right, we need a roll call vote. Richard?
No,
Guy?
Goes on
Aye.
out. Okay,
Steve?
you're back.
Aye,
And myself, aye. So 3-1.
because
So
of what
when would you like
Guy,
to schedule
the
the
way
hearing?
Guy explained it to me, basically.
yeah, I mean, if we don't
If we
accept
vote
it,
it
he'll-
down, he's just gonna go to the town clerk and
Yep.
say,
here's my plan. The clock is ticking, so tell the planning board.
And we will get that on the agenda for next week for a discussion. And then in April to get a public hearing set up.
Would you like to do the first meeting in April or the second meeting in April?
If the first week in April gives you enough time, I think that would be a good idea, guys.
I can get the advertisement in.
Yep, okay.
And we'll get comments back from Graves.
We should be able to. I mean, they've already reviewed the preliminary plan, so I don't think there'll be, a lot of
Right.
additional work to review this one.
Right, but to Richard's point, they didn't review it with duplexes.
there's a couple of other things that I think are at issue here too. One of the things that was presented in the 9-9 presentation by Mr. Lavoie is, I think he made comment of no wetlands. And if you look at what's presented or what we've now accepted as the definitive plan, there's wetlands all over the place. There either are or they aren't, and they didn't happen in the last month and a half or so. I don't think these guys are dealing in good faith with us. I don't know who's calling the shots. Mr. Lavoie must be just the front man, if you will. But somebody's doing something, and I'm not sure that we're getting the whole story. And what we're going to end up with is going to be something Less
Bill?
than we bargained for. It's a little bait and switch going on here.
Bill, when does conservation see this?
They only have to see it if there are wetlands on the site, or if they're
Well,
within 100 feet.
I just pulled the plan up again. I'm looking at it right now. Isolated vegetated wetlands. Is the isolated the key word there? Is that what makes it a pass?
Where do you see that, Steve?
I'm looking at to the right of that area where all the
Lot
stormwater
6?
is going to run down into.
Lot 5 and 6?
Yeah, right below, right on lot 5,
Oh, I
lot
see, right.
5 and lot 6.
Mhm.
That whole area back there, it's got those little weed, cartoons
No,
there.
I
It
see
says
it now, yeah.
Isolated
Annotated as
vegetated
wetlands, if
wetlands.
I'm not mistaken.
So it's a good point. I'll refer this to the conservation agent, Steve, and he can let us know whether they need to file with the Conservation Commission.
Again, if you look at what was presented back in September, what is shown is what looks to be a forested area. There's no indication of water there. It's just green. It looks like somebody's idealized version of a Garden of Eden, if you will, but the garden's a little soggy.
I guess this isn't our purview. This is more of a legal issue, but it's amazing to me how many of those abutters have buildings on this property. I'm looking at one shed on the line, one shed that's half over the line. You get another abutter there. He's got a shed half over the line and a coop completely over the line. I don't know how that's going to work out. Looks like somebody's losing a chicken coop is what it looks like.
Well, at least the chickens won't drown in the wetlands anyway.
The excavator that digs the cellar holes will be, probably gentle when it pushes them back into their yard.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So if I'm correct, we have a hard stop at 10 o'clock, right? So we're kind of up against it. So if we want to move on to standard business, is there anything in the subdivisions that we need to talk about, Bill?
Just in terms of Pierpont Estates, Jeff Walsh and Jeff Murray have both prepared their letters of having inspected the subdivision of the portions of Pierpont that the developer wants town meeting to accept. So those are being forwarded to the developer and his engineer. The number of issues that need to be corrected before they would sign off on the project. So the developer has obviously until town meeting to make those corrections. And the board, would also have to approve the subdivision as completed. And I don't think you'd be willing to do that if your staff hasn't signed off on the construction yet. So I think we've got a couple of months before town meeting, so hopefully he can get the work done so that you'll feel comfortable approving the work as completed.
Bill, that's a list of 25 items as I count, or as I see them noted here. That looks like a rather ambitious collection of things to be addressed. Hopefully there is time for that to be done.
Right. I don't have any other reports on any other subdivisions, Dan.
Okay. Any inspections or actions associated with site plans?
Nope.
Planner's plate.
A couple of things. The prospective buyer of Legacy Estates asked me a question. He's thinking about buying that development or that proposed development, and wanted to know whether he could put a model home in the development without the board having to do a formal lot release. So a lot release, as you know, would require you to approve at least the subdivision up to the base course. And so that would require him to build the road to that standard. And so I didn't know whether you had a policy that would allow a model home to be built without the road being up to that standard, or whether you would only allow the model home to be built after the road is built to that standard.
Guy, any past experience with something like this?
My comment to Bill on that was, I believe to get a building permit, you need to have a lot release.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna have a model home, you're gonna want to invite the public in. So you need the model home constructed, and you need an occupancy permit so that the public can go there. And you need to be able to get there. You know, it's not like this subdivision is right on the edge of the road where you could just, you know, step off the road and walk a couple feet to the model home. It's going to be in a field someplace. So you need a driveway to get there. So my comment to Bill was that, you know, I would say to the developer, you could do this development in 2 or 3 phases. And if it was more advantageous for him to put the model home, say off the Dudley Hill side, and put it over there and have, you know, build the little parking lot where they're going to have for the walking trail and use that as model home parking, and then put the very first house in and build the first 100 feet of road or whatever he needs up until the base course. You know, that would be probably the most inexpensive way for him to do something like this. Or if it made sense to come in off Airport Road, I don't know which is the easiest way to build from.
So
But
a model home, it isn't just an empty house that's used for showing?
it is, but typically they have a realtor station there so that people can come in, you know,
Yeah.
daily and look at it. It's open.
Right,
It's
but
like a
I was
constant
just
open
questioning
house.
the occupancy permit
Well,
requirement.
people are going to be going in there. You don't want to build a house and not have an occupancy permit.
Well, not only that, but at some point in time, it's going to be sold.
right?
Oh,
Right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
that it's being
yeah.
constructed. It has to be constructed to code. So that's another portion of the occupancy permit, is make
Oh,
sure the
yeah,
codes
right.
are taken care of.
I understand your point.
I mean, technically,
have
you
a
need an
safety issue,
occupancy. You
railings
need an
missing.
occupancy permit for a garage if you build a garage.
So, yeah, I guess the sense is that, no, we can't just build a model home and open it up without the road being built to that standard. So I'll get back to him and let him know that he has to build the road before he could get.
Not only that, but the precedent that you would be setting. I mean, then we'd have every developer come in here and be like, okay, I want to put a model home.
Or a model
In fact,
duplex.
I need
why
2
not?
model homes because I got 2 different styles of home I want to showcase.
The other item I had, Dan, was the town has gotten word that we've been accepted for a grant program for the local rapid recovery program from the Department of Housing and Community Development. We've been approved for a $30,000 study to look at the impacts of COVID on the local economy. So 125 towns in the Commonwealth applied, and Dudley was one of them, and they've all been approved. We've been paired up with the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission as our plan facilitator. We've had a webinar this week that I attended. Looks like it's going to be a really good program, and I'm glad the town has decided to take advantage of that. The Economic Development Committee will be spearheading that as the local body that's working with CMRPC on the plan. But I thought the board would be interested to know that that process will be going on, and it's another effort to really help the town recover from the effects of the pandemic. And there'll be a number of recommendations coming out of that study, which I think will benefit the town in the long run as well.
Good news.
So that's all I had under Planner's Plate.
Okay. So as far as comments from the planning board are concerned, I'd like to open up. When do we have our town meeting in June? Excuse
The
me.
town meeting, Dan, is usually the bylaw says it's held the Monday before Memorial Day.
I meant elections is what I meant.
Oh, elections, I'm sorry.
I'm fried. I don't do 3-hour meetings.
Did you get a memo from the town clerk, Dan?
Yeah, I did. That's kind of why I'm asking, is I'm trying to figure out when the elections are, because then we're going to have to do a reorganization of the board. My understanding is that we usually do that at the second meeting in June. And to get to my actual point, I'm trying to, I'm going to have a really difficult time making the June 9th meeting. So I wasn't sure if that's, I just want to put that on the board's radar if we either don't schedule a meeting or have someone else chair it while I'm absent. And if the June 9th meeting is after the town election, then maybe it's not an issue.
The town
Maybe I get
election,
booted.
according to this memo from the town clerk, is June 14th.
Okay.
So you would still be on the board on the 9th.
Yeah, so there's a good chance I'm not gonna be able to make that. So when we get closer, we can decide if we need to have a meeting or someone else chairs it.
Okay.
We'll still have a quorum without me, even if, if for some reason Bill can't make it. We've got enough people, so. Okay,
So
that's all I got. Anybody else?
I'm gonna take pity on you. I think you've probably heard more than you wanted to hear from me already this evening.
Oh, so I think it was a long meeting, but this is a good meeting. I mean,
Well,
we
you
made
stood
a
there
lot of
15
progress.
minutes before the hard cutoff, so.
The complete streets, I think we made a lot of headway with that. Yeah, it was long, but I mean, Jem and her team did a lot of work, and I think we put a lot of thought into it too. So I think that's all good. The points brought up about Butler Way is I quite frankly didn't read everything as exact as I should have. So I'm very glad that got brought up too. So
Yeah, good catch, Richard.
yeah, when it's a good meeting, you can't argue with the timing. We're making good use of it all. So yeah, I can't help it. I'm old and tired, I guess. Anybody
Bill,
else? Any comments, Guy?
I just got one question. Bill, last meeting we discussed looking into having Central Mass Regional Planning work on the overlay, basically marijuana overlay district for the town meeting. Is that still ongoing?
So we had identified 2 projects for LPA hours. The stormwater bylaws was one that I
One, yep.
passed that up to CMRPC, and I believe they're going to help us with that. And as you point out, Guy, the second one was preparing the overlay district map for the Doherty Farm as a marijuana cultivation overlay district. I've since had some correspondence with Mrs. Doherty, who is now rethinking her approach. I think which her current thought is to ask the planning board to sponsor a zoning amendment that would allow cultivation by special permit of the planning board in Res 87, which is where her property is located. So I know we had discussed that as one of the options early on. So she'd have to come before. I've asked her to submit a letter to the planning board for your consideration whether you would want to sponsor the article to do that or not. So we'll have that discussion at a later meeting. She could also, if the board did not want to sponsor that article, she could do it as a citizen's petition by getting 10 signatures of 10 residents of the town. And then it would go to town meeting as a citizen's petition. Or, she could decide to go back to the other plan of doing an overlay district approach. So it's kind of in a state of flux at the moment, but that's the latest information I have.
I think citizens petition is the way that she ought to go, because I kind of like the idea of the board staying kind of neutral in this whole thing. So it doesn't look like we're all for helping local businesses, but on the other hand, because with a lot of people, marijuana is still a dicey issue. Maybe it's better for us to just keep our hands off of it as far as that goes. I don't know. That's just my thinking.
Well, do you want me to have her, make her case to the planning board to sponsor the article, or would you prefer that she go the other route?
Even if it's a citizen's petition, we're going to still have to hold a public hearing and make an endorsement to the town meeting. So
Sure. I'm just saying that.
The problem with the citizen's petition is if it's not written correctly, it's going to get thrown out in town meeting. Whereas if we do it, it would have the I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think my feeling is that she should be allowed to come to the board to make her case.
Right.
And then you can decide after hearing what she has to say whether you want to sponsor it or not.
Yep, agreed.
I just think that they're not going to be the first. They're definitely not going to be the last. I think it's going to be, every farm in town, once they find out that how lucrative this can be, they're going to be coming and asking, can I get in on this? And, if you have the overlay district, it's just something like you just keep adding the plots of land onto the overlay map versus having to rezone the town every time somebody comes up with the question of, can I do this?
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Horn. In your experience now, you indicated this becomes an overlay district, and I guess we're targeting this family, particularly the Dohertys. So they then have permission to grow, or we allow them to grow marijuana with the proper THC requirements on and so on. Does that extend to the next buyer or next owner of that property? Does that go in perpetuity or does that expire at some point?
You can
Well,
put it, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they need both the planning board approval and the Cannabis Control Commission approval. So a new buyer or owner of that property would have to go back to the CCC to get a license or to transfer the license over to them, to the new buyer.
They wouldn't have to come back to the town then.
So when you issue a special permit decision, you can make it pertain only to the applicant, and that any new owner of the property would have to come back to the board. So you would have control over that issue. You could require, you could just allow a transfer without coming back, or you could require them to come back for a new special permit.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board?
Just a quick question. So Bill, did they explain why they don't want to do the mill overlay? I'm not sorry, I said mill overlay, the overlay districts.
She's been doing research and has been talking to other folks, and I think she felt that it might be difficult to get that through town meeting. Thought she might have a better chance with just allowing it in Res 87 by special permit.
Well, I think she's gonna, the same obstacles that she would meet with the overlay are gonna be the same obstacles she's gonna be up against. Just the general stigma that some people have against that.
Right.
I want to clarify, I don't have a problem with it. We, support our local agricultural businesses, no matter what they're growing, as long as it's legal, which it now is. So, but yeah, I think Guy's got a good point. The overlay would be the way to handle this.
That's just my opinion. What's your opinion, Bill?
I guess the disadvantage of the Res 87 is that it would open up to a wide portion of the town to grow marijuana. So that, is maybe good or bad, depending on your perspective. But the overlay approach really gives town meeting control over each and every application for outdoor cultivation. So,
yeah. Because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe like 2/3 of Dudley is Res 87.
Probably it's a large part of town.
It's the largest part.
Right. And of course, there's a local process. The selectmen have to approve the host community agreement.
Right.
For every license that would be issued in the town. So, and there's, advantages for revenue to the town for each marijuana license that it allows. So, you can make a good case for, why not allow it? Because it's simply growing another type of crop.
Why don't we, well, I know our next meeting is pretty busy, but yeah, what were you going to do? Ask her to write a letter or come to the next meeting?
Well, yeah, I wanted her to add, write a letter to the board to ask if you would be willing to sponsor that article rather than me, sort of carrying it on her behalf. So I think she's the one who should approach you and make her case.
Okay.
Can we fit her in next week or for our next meeting?
Sure.
You guys okay with that? We'll take her before we talk to Gemma and her team.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Down to 6 minutes. Any more comments? So we got our next meeting is set.
We have one invoice, Dan, from Graves Engineering for, geez, I forget, what was it, Michelle, do you recall? I think it was the Butler's Way witnessing of the
Test pits?
soil test.
Yeah.
For $153, I had sent you So it's $153 for, yeah, the review stormwater corrective action plan. Well, I see, no, that was for the AMP solar project. And their submission of a plan to correct the drainage problem from the solar farm onto the Mungin property on West Dudley Road. And I'd asked them to submit it to Graves for review. Jeff Walsh reviewed the plan and okayed it. So I'm waiting for them to actually put in the new perimeter drain to resolve that drainage problem.
Anything else we need to touch on before we close?
Just your vote to approve that invoice.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the invoice to Graves Engineering for the AMP solar project.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the Graves invoice for the AMP Solar project. We will do a quick vote by roll call. Richard?
Aye.
Guy?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And myself, also an aye. Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, if it's in order, I would make a motion that we adjourn.
I have a great motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion to adjourn. We'll go through roll call again. Richard?
Aye.
Guy?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And myself, very happily, aye. All right. Thanks for everybody's patience and for hanging on, and see you guys in 2 weeks.